Jesus.
And we are live.
We're live.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody. And we got our first comment in the house.
Musty Wargamers Season 4, Episode 13. Thank you for joining us. We have got Dwayne from Plastic Crake Gaming. What's the crake there, Dwayne?
What's the crack? I'm grand. How are you, Palmer?
It's the scarred crack plastic man.
Yeah, one of them, you know. Just call me what you like as long as it's not too early in the morning.
So we got Brad in the house, Lord Draconum. Hello, Brad. Thanks for joining us. Looks like we've got some people online, but watching. So, how's everybody doing today?
Well, I'm feeling okay.
You can elaborate if you like.
I got my first COVID shot today. I'm sore. And top it off with my 3 hours of sleep. I'm doing good.
How about you, Dwayne? How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah.
What time is it
all
there?
over the place, but the usual. Look, I work night shift, so I think it's like 2 o'clock in the morning here. It's like midday to me.
It's fine for you.
I could literally travel to you guys in Canada or the States, and there'd be no jet lag. I literally I do night shifts, so I'm used to getting up at this hour.
I hear you. I've done that before, and many years ago, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
we got Clark Step in the house.
Shift.
Hello, Clark. Thanks for joining us. So, as our usual round table of introductions, maybe we'll start with a special guest tonight. Dwayne, would you like to share if you have anything from either hobbying or gaming stuff that you've been up to lately that you'd like to talk about? And of course, if you happen to have a musty drink, not required, you're welcome to show that at this time as well.
Okay, I don't drink that much whiskey, so I'll get on to the musty drink. So I was originally going to potentially crack open
IPA edition.
That's nice.
IPA. That was only given to me, but it's because I drink whiskey at a glacial rate. We'll say I decided I'll crack on with the bottle of Teeling's whiskey that I had with you guys the last time.
Good.
So I'll crack on with this one, and I'll save the IPA for future episodes.
That truly is a musty drink. The last time you had it was at the Musty Show.
It's probably dust on it. Gaming wise, I've just been mucking around. I've been trying to get back into painting some miniatures. So I have like a WA banner knob. I know it's probably terrible and the focus isn't on it, but it's like a custom WA banner knob that I've been working on. So it's like some plastic card work and some kit bashing going on.
Nice.
Having a bit of fun with that. And apart from that, if you can go,
I'm going to blow up your screen there if you want to show that again.
Bang.
Yeah. Nice. Cool.
Yeah,
it's focusing on your face there.
So hold on.
Yeah.
Hide the good charm and looks. Eventually, it might. No, maybe. It's cool. It's a cool plastic card badminton thing that I bet. There you go.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
So that badminton, the glyph is all plastic card. It's like double layered. It's all some of the evergreen stuff you get out of like the model railroad hobby stores, and just some styrene rod doing a bit of that. And then,
it looks great.
Yeah, doing some of that stuff.
It looks like right off of a plastic sprue. It looks really good.
Yeah, there's an art to it. And what else have I got? I've got a few bits and pieces I've been messing around, 3D printing some terrain for Battletech. So I've been doing like
nice.
Some fuel and some buildings. I've been designing like buildings myself and then print them off. So I've got some...
Are you doing resin these days, or are you doing FDM?
No, it's all FDM. I'm specifically designing stuff that's printable FDM and doing like extraction fans or whatever. So a lot of level 1, level 2, level 3 stuff. It's all single hex stuff, but I'm having trying to put a bit of paint on some of it, having a bit of fun. So that's what I've been messing around with lately. Yeah, just design the terrain for Battletech and painting orcs. So the usual. I haven't even poured me drink. I need to take a sip now. We said the B word.
There you go. That's right. You didn't say it. This is like one of the only times that I don't drink because I haven't even poured mine yet. So
you get away with it now.
That's right. Nice.
So probably apart from
Good
working, bit of fun and hobbying. Good crack.
How about you, Rusty? What have you been up to
Well, okay. If I have to. What? It's like when I pick this up, this clipboard bends. Da-da. I got a whole clipboard of nothing but
Oh, wow.
lots and lots of 15 mil stuff. Let's see if we can turn this down a little bit. There we go. Oh, you can see all the goodies. This is all my undead stuff I painted this week. You can see it's like, it didn't take me very long to paint this stuff. It goes pretty quickly.
Yeah, you've been pretty productive.
Yeah, the big one is this this little chimera I have here.
Yeah, that's cool. Three headed chimera.
Chimera. And I painted these guys up today. This unit right here.
Mm-hmm.
There's what, 30 of them, 30, something like that. This unit, I just started on them today and finished them in nothing flat, since I was not up to much. It just tells you how quickly these things get painted once you get going on them. But you know, these are bowmen, and I got 3 units of spearmen, and I got the werewolves here, the little guys.
Nice.
Something to go chompy with everybody. So, and I did, and I was like, there we get it. I think if you watched my last video, I did show these guys. I do have the banner on these guys.
Oh, cool.
So it does have the banner. It's a GW banner. Oh, got that one. They're already arguing with each other here. It's like just like in Night at the Museum, the chimeras eyeballing the skeletons. It's like, I'm gonna tear you all up.
So you've been gaming a fair bit lately, huh?
Let's see. Oh, we didn't have a game this last week. I don't think. No, we didn't game this last week. One of the guys that we had in our group came down with COVID, so we just like, okay, we'll skip this week then. Type of deal.
Makes sense.
Like his wife.
You don't want to have a super spreader event?
Nah. Well, I'm the only one left in the entire group that hasn't picked it up yet, so. And tonight's drink of choice is Rich and Rare Canadian whiskey.
Cool. And I've never had that one.
It's not too bad. It's actually got kind of a spicy note to it, because it actually has a little bit of rye in it. So you get that Canadian rye whiskeys going with it.
Mm-hmm.
I got a nice little dowl going there.
There you go.
It has, well, when you smell it, you get some spicy notes off of it, and kind of a caramel, vanilla with raisin scent coming off of it.
I always laugh when I hear people saying these things about whiskey. I'm just like, yep, smells like alcohol.
I kind of joke around with Rusty with that too, because he's got all the flavors and he's got all the categories, and I call it either good or bad.
Yeah,
that's pretty much me. It's
good.
I like it, or I don't.
Bad.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it's like that's one thing is when you got you smell, you exercise your nose, and you spend time trying to pull those scents out. Then you actually, once you start doing it, then you realize it's like, oh, you can start smelling things coming off of it.
I'm getting some earthy tones on this one.
Dirt, huh? Smells like 100% dirt.
Well, I don't have a lot to share this week. I haven't been painting that much, to be honest. I don't know whether it's work and just life stuff, but I've had a little bit where I've not been doing a whole lot. It's not that I haven't been thinking about stuff. I have picked a couple things up like on the way home from work. That's easy to do. doesn't take a lot of time. But I do have these guys that I showed where I started early days on just doing some airbrushing on these motorcycles and starting to get stuff on these Infinity bikers. And I could show those real quick.
Get on your bad motor scooter and ride.
Yeah. Let's see here. And so let's see how I can. Let me focus here. So yeah, like I'm starting to just do just a little bit.
Screen yourself.
Yeah, let me do that. Hang on.
Supersize.
So I'm starting to work a little bit on these guys. All I have is a solid color, like on the top of the bike, but just doing a little bit just to get a little bit of contrast, some metallic brights and darks with the metal. But I have a lot of work to do still on it. It's kind of overly bright right now. But yeah, I like these miniatures a lot. I have a lot of refinement to do on this paint scheme still. So that's kind of what I'm up to at the moment. I just started really today painting these guys a little bit, but I'm going to work on these. I'm got a couple of days now where I'm off tomorrow on the weekend, so I'm going to dabble here and there on these guys and see what I can do for that. And let's see.
I'm liking the cacti. It's a nice touch.
Yeah, it was cool to do a little bit of the 3D printing with that. I know we're not talking about 3D printing tonight at all, but I am actually looking at resin printers. And so I still have my FTM and I like it, but I'm just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of, I didn't realize they got so cheap, like,
Yeah.
Particularly the smaller ones there, but I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm thinking in the next 6 months, I'll probably have one.
The only thing that's put me off getting a resin one is the workspace and the cleanup area that is sort of needed. I don't have that, so it's like I'm happy enough with the FDM. It's it's literally just sitting beside me set up, so it's easy enough to just have it running, and I don't have to worry about the cleanup space. It's really the space for me, the cleanup process.
Yeah.
You need a dedicated sort of space for it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I'm still looking into it too. I mean, that it's a little deceiving, like you're saying, because really they are so much smaller than an FDM, but then you still need to be able to clean up, like you're talking about, and you're dealing with liquids, and you don't want to be spilling and making a mess and stuff. So, but as far as my musty drink today, I've shown this one on the show. This is Troubled Monk. It's called Juicy Gossip, which is perfect for today's show. And this, I'll tell you, this is a big beer. It's 6.5%, which is, it's a respectable alcohol content for a beer. But to be honest, I've had some stronger ones, and when I drink this one, it kind of hits you pretty fast. I don't know about that 6.5, to be honest. Like, I'll be fair. But yeah, so, and it's tasty. I think it's a New England IPA. So it's got a nice color.
It's a juice bomb.
Yeah, Juicy Gossip. So I figured I'd have this one tonight.
This is what they call in the business foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's right. I'm telling you, this one hits you hard and fast. So what are we talking about tonight?
We're going 5 rounds with Mike Tyson tonight.
Ding, ding.
Oh my gosh, I could smell it. I could smell the fruitiness already.
Oh, that's what I love about New England IPAs is that it's this effervescence that comes off of it. It's just
this one's out of a small city called Red Deer, which is in between Edmonton and Calgary. Most people that like hockey know Edmonton and Calgary. Just if they watch NHL or anything like that. Yeah. But
it's up
Red
there,
Deer. Yeah, Red Deer is basically halfway between, and that's where this brewery is, and it's pretty good.
You go straight up there to Winnipeg, and then take a left, and get over there.
So why don't we, before we hit the first topic and stuff, and go on further, maybe we should just take a roll call here. I know that Brad and Clark are in the house, and looks like we just got some commentary here. Just nice 15 mil stuff here from Brad, talking about Rusty stuff, and then he says, almost powder blue motorcycles. I'm getting the itch to get some 15 millimeter stuff, but working on my Lord of the Rings goblins. Yeah, I am trying to go for some dark light contrast on that, and I have to add back in some dark, and then I'm thinking about doing a little glazing with some translucent blue, darker blue, just to create some darker metal look in there as well. So yeah, it's always fun to pull the airbrush out again and experiment. It's not my main way of painting, but I do typically like to use it in infinity. I do find it adds a bit sometimes with the infinity style miniatures. So
are these Yamahas or these Suzukis?
Of the future.
They're blue, right? So
it could be Suzuki Haas. Who knows? Maybe there's a merger.
Suzuki.
And looks like we got Dan Booman in the house. Hello, Dan. So.
Yes, I haven't messaged Dan since tonight. So.
Well,
yeah, Stryker and I were. He was wondering if there was any new Beastman army list in the.
Sorry, Rusty. You were saying.
You've left them lost for words yet again,
I can tell you're waiting for my answer.
He's literally speechless. I love how the guy in Ireland has better signal to you than your neighbor.
Well, I kind of cursed him because before the show started, it wasn't his last show, but my last show before that he froze up, and it was actually towards the end of the show, and he had to leave. But I had said, "Oh, it's a good thing in the last show didn't happen. Hopefully, you're okay tonight." You
hexed him. Yeah, you cursed him, man.
Yeah, I cursed him a bit. He may end up. It's possible he may end up just going out and then coming
bouncing back in. Yeah, it might be like a router reset for him or something along that lines. But it's okay. You have me here now, so I can help carry the team.
I usually have to get kind of creative. Let me go grab the puppets.
The finger puppets come out.
That's right. So let's see. Oh, he's gone. Yeah, he'll just be coming. He'll come back.
I'm sure he'll be back.
Yeah. So let's see here. So Dwayne.
Palmer.
So what have you been gaming at all lately, like during COVID or?
Physically, no. I haven't played a war game. So we sort of we initially went into lockdown, then it eased a little bit, and we were allowed to socialize with one person. So I was playing some BattleTech with a friend.
There you go.
Literally one friend in his place for a couple of months. I got like 2 or 3 games in, and that's it. Like physical gaming's been off the cards for most of 2020 and going into this year. We don't know, maybe into July or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's been knocked on the head. But I've been doing other things with I'm part of 40K Orc community. There's a group there on Facebook, and we're some of the guys got together to run a Tabletop Simulator.
Oh yeah.
Tournament that we've started playing. So I've started dabbling with 40K Tabletop Simulator, and there's a Discord, everything BattleTech. I've been playing with quite a few guys on there. We've been playing BattleTech on Tabletop Simulator, and it's been good crack actually. Obviously it's not the same as gaming in person, but it's the next best thing, and it's the only sort of opportunity I'll get to play against some people because we live in different continents.
I was looking at Tabletop Simulator. I was talking to Rusty about it actually. I in some ways. I'd like to do it actually. I'd like to, but I just find time-wise, I struggle with the whole learning something new, like the whole idea of when I'm going to do it. Is it easy?
Yeah. It's once you get over the initial, this does this, that does that, the commands, you're grand, you're flying. Yeah. Like it's a steep learning curve, but there's not much to it. It's like anything new. You know what I mean? You feel like you're bombarded with a lot, but there's not. It's clicking and dragging, and people showing you how to subscribe to files, and then you're sorted. It's like you need this, and this, and that's it. Go.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me at this point in my life or what, but I just find when I'm not working and I'm not doing stuff with family and then I'm not like thinking about it or painting something even I was talking to Rusty, like for Crisis Protocol, they just released a whole bunch of like Spider-Man stuff that looks amazing. But I was thinking like, I can't buy anything for that until I've tried it now, because I painted the core set and I still haven't. And I've actually read the booklet to play, but it's been so long since I've read it, I got to read it again. And I haven't even played the game. Like I haven't even played the game on the table just to mess with the rules, like without even anybody there. And I even have kids that'd be interested in playing it. Like, my daughters would be like, totally play it and try it. But it's just a matter of like reading it, setting the time aside, playing a game. Like I've gotten so lazy, and part of that COVID's made it worse in some ways, because I used to do stuff with friends and play games. And now I just almost think of anything I can do but actually sitting down and like messing around with stuff on the table. And so the idea of the tabletop simulator is just like another thing. Like I should try it. I should try doing it, but it's like I think of so many things that I just don't do. Yeah, now.
It's a mental barrier that there's quite a few guys were the same sort of. I was like that myself. I wasn't too enamored with the idea of gaming on a tabletop simulator for it. You know what I mean? But it's. Mm-hmm. I think what happens is quite a few of the guys in the 40K group that we have, the 40K or community group, we played a game, and then a few of them were like, "Oh, you can do this," and then they realized it. Once you see somebody doing something and how straightforward it is, that sort of, oh, this actually isn't as bad as I initially thought, type of thing. But yeah, it's like me, I thought going into lockdown, oh, I'll get loads of miniatures painted. No, it's gotten so much worse, man. It really has. I've barely gotten anything painted. I've been procrastinating with video games quite a lot.
Yeah. Something that's just like you could just sit down and do and not. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. There's for me, it's movies.
I like film to begin with. Like even at the best of times, I like to watch a lot of movies. But then it's been easier to do that. However, there's a lot. You can't go to the movies, but still. Rusty did send a message that his computer decided to reboot, and so I would imagine he didn't say that it's updating, so I suppose that's a good thing. But he said that it's a reboot, and so I assume that he's coming in fairly shortly. Then
the hamster finally got the carrot in the wheel. Is that what happened there? The internal stopped working.
Right.
The squirrel got the nut. I'm finding like there's less of an incentive to get stuff painted, to get stuff done, because it's kind of indefinite in my neck of the woods as to when gaming is going to happen. So it's, I suppose when you were meeting up with your friends, there's more of an incentive. Like definitely when I was playing games, there was more of an incentive to get miniatures painted up or get color schemes going. But I've been happily printing terrain, it's really odd. It really is with like the 3D printed. It's like I'll spend hours designing something, and then I'll be like, okay, well, I'll start painting this building. And while I'm doing that, I'll get another building printing. Oh, and I'm halfway through painting this, and I'll take that one off. I get another building printing. So I'm like, okay, I see the slippery slope this is. I need to, pump the brakes a little bit on this. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I'm getting my eyeballs in terrain.
That's the thing with 3D printing. Is like, I've already noticed that. Like, I can look over and see a mountain of gray stuff over there that I've printed, that I'm supposed to paint that I haven't. And then you kind of ask yourself like, so you can like get all this like cheaper terrain, supposedly like you do this 3D printing and it's great, but then like you end up with this like another whole mountain of stuff that you don't use, right? And so that's kind of tough too. So you just got to, I guess, be disciplined about it. I don't know.
Well, this is it. It's like, how many fuel tanks do we need? I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to use more than 8 on any one time. So I'm like, I'll need to design a new one then at that stage. So that's what I've been doing with myself. It's like I've been enjoying designing some terrain. Just there's great designs out there, but I was more sort of curious of the design aspect myself.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't done anything like spectacular, but I've used one of the ones. One of the easiest, it's associated with Thingiverse, but one of the easiest designing programs. It's like really limited, but it's like for geometric shapes primarily. I use that to make just some old school shields, and it's just fun, right? The idea of actually taking something from your head and actually like making it appear in the real world. It's like kind of crazy,
it's
right?
Mad, that mad moment. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
like You just hold it and you're like, I you know, it's just, there's something magical about your idea becomes, you know, physically present.
That's, to me, that's the beauty of it. Like, I mean, you know, the beauty of it is, like, even with when you don't design, like the idea that I can find, like, say I'm going to put some cactuses on this base, and I'm going to go in and find some cactuses, and within 10 minutes I'm putting cactuses on the base, like, you know, like, or whatever it is, like, you know, but still, like, that to me, it's not really as much a money savings, like a huge money savings, like 3D printing. To me, it's more the ability to create. Like, that's
it unlocks more creativity. You know what I mean? Like, it's not saying that you can be lazy and get away with it. There is a skill set to 3D printing, but I find it's unlocked creativity for me, because I'd be very hesitant in designing things in case I'd ruin them.
Yeah.
But when you're doing it in 3D, it's like I can copy and duplicate, and I can tear this one apart and rebuild it, and I still have a copy of it over there. So you can there's always that safeguarding sort of aspect where I feel more free form to experiment. Whereas if I'm doing something in plastic card, you know, I try and sketch it out on paper first, and then I'll transfer that idea over, and then I'll cut it. But if I mess up the cutting, you know what I mean? You have to start from scratch then. So I find that aspect of it very freeing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Brad says he's been painting more than gaming, kind of like what we're talking about. And then he kind of called it, like, it's Tinkercad was what I was searching for. That's the one I've used. It's really like when I use that, I could tell, like, right off the bat that compared to some other programs, it likely has a lot of limitations, but it is kind of a nice, cool thing. You can still do a fair bit of stuff with it.
Oh yeah, you can do interesting stuff. Like, I even designed a token for orcs. So I did, like, axe cliff on one side and, like, an orky facing the other, and, like, checks and dags and stuff like that.
But did you import those images on there, or did you actually?
No. They're all made from shapes. So, like, that axe, the 2 axe heads is like 4 or 5 shapes I've put together.
See, that's really cool.
And
you have to get really creative with that.
Yeah, you have to get creative. Like, all the checks around the edges of it, that's actually like 2 sets of gears that I've cored the inside out and then sized them. So you wouldn't believe the amount of effort I've put into something so simple, but, like, all these triangles and I do believe it. Yeah. Well, you know, like, that's the thing. Like, but it's none of this is imported. This is all, like, I sat down and just, like, drew out shapes and clipped stuff and merged stuff together, and I came up with that. Like, so it's, you know, you can have fun with it. It's great, Craig. Brad
says he made a tank in Tinkercad, and nice. Looks like we got Mel in the house. Striker, hey there. You just missed Rusty. He's actually on his way back in. His computer had to be rebooted. So I'm assuming he'll be in fairly shortly. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I'm going to be still doing stuff with my FDM. Like, to be quite honest, I have some buildings, like some building designs that I've done in FDM, and I'm just going to continue to do them with my FDM, even, you know, after I get resin. And I just was kind of determining whether I want to go big or go smaller with the resin printer. And, you know, it's always hard to make that decision, like money versus, like, do I wait longer?
I can see the merit of having one of each, to be honest with you, because there's, like, some miniatures that I'd want to print off that I wouldn't want to do in FDM, but then there's other bigger things that just wouldn't be feasible to do in resin. I mean, you could do it, but it sort of defies the point of it, and you can do it in FDM. Like, FDM really is, like, sort of the terrain maker's printer. It really is. But
that's kind of why I got mine. I got mine for that reason. I mean, the only thing, and I don't really understand this really well because I've only just recently started looking into it, but some of them you can hollow your resin prints out. Like, there's a setting where you can hollow it, so, like, you're not doing, like, a whole solid thing of resin, you know, because that would be kind of ridiculous. And so that's actually appealing to me. I don't know enough about the slicing, like how you slice, like, in a design, you know, and then it sounds like it's easy, you know, like, but you can take, like, a big design and slice it into a couple parts, you know, to then do it that way. But I don't know how that completely works. But yeah, I think the only reason, looks like Punisher's back in the house. Let's see here. There he is.
Hello.
You're lower tier now, Rusty. Sorry.
You've been demoted.
Man. right in the middle. It's like I was saying something, I think, and all of a sudden it just says updating. Like, I never even clicked on anything, and it's like it decided the computer decided to do an update right in the middle of everything.
We were just talking resin printing and stuff while you were gone, just shooting the breeze. Mel's in the house now too, and he says, I'm toying with the idea of getting a resin printer for 15 mil miniatures. Not sure how the quality would be though. I mean, I think it'd be pretty good actually. Like,
I have like some resin prints here. Like, he's a big boy, but
hang on, I'll
I
blow
got
up your screen.
I got sent a resin print. Like, that's a resin print miniature, and it's absolutely like festooned in detail. Now it's a big miniature, but like, the detail level on it is quite impressive. You know what I mean? I didn't think resin prints could get good quality. Obviously I haven't finished painting them, as you can tell, but like, yeah, it's
pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's just printed, like, and then like I glued his arms together and whatever. But it's very much at the stage now where it can compare with traditional resin casting. It's up there. Like, I'm very surprised myself. It is really up there.
Well, and what it comes down to is, I mean, a lot of times people will talk about 15 millimeter models in the past, like just in general, how much detail they're going to be on there. Even like with traditional sculpting and just anything, like people would always say, well, comparing it to 28, like how does it look? And like, but I think that as long as the design has the detail, there'll be no problem with printing it.
No, it's
at all.
Microns, like it's it's like really small.
Yeah. Brad says, AI on the machine.
Acting up on Rusty's half, probably.
There we go.
Skynet was trying to infiltrate. That's all it's going to.
Yeah.
How much? 50 million? I haven't seen much of it myself.
Well, yeah, you probably could find some images. I'd be really surprised if, as long as the design has it. And the one thing about digital sculpting is they can kind of get theoretically a really high level of detail in there, right? Like with the digital sculpting. Right. And so as long as you can run it on there, I think you'd be probably impressed with it.
Design it big, scale it down.
Yeah.
Let you scale anything to whatever scale you want.
Yeah.
You're looking at a lot of those resin printers now are between $300 and $400. So that's
even lower, actually. If you go for if you're just interested in miniatures and not bigger stuff, I mean, right now I'm looking at Canadian dollars of $299 for a top like Elegoo, resin printer, and that's so you're talking like $250 like or less US, and that's pretty impressive. Now, granted, that's not for the resin, and that's not for the washing machine if you want to get that, like the wash station and the curing station and all that stuff. But I do agree with you, Dwayne. I do think that there's still lots of advantages to having the FDM style, and I'm still planning on using mine for lots of stuff. And it's kind of just at a certain point, I could see myself getting one, and it's mainly because the price has gone down. Like I spent quite a bit of money on my FDM. I mean, I spent a lot more, and it wasn't even that long ago, but I spent a lot more than what I'd be spending on a resin printer. Because at the time, I mean, it was a pretty big investment for me. So
I think I spent like 250 or 300 euros on the Ender 3 Pro that I have. And that was like a year and a bit ago or something like that. But even, there's still, you can get ones relatively cheaply. They're like partially assembled. So if you like building things, it's a project in and of itself. That that's a bit of fun. But yeah, like even the price of the resin printers is coming way down, and what you're getting for it is rather impressive.
Oh yeah.
Imagine somebody has those drop ships for that B game that you can.
Well, I spied a pink egg in the back there, and I was like, potential overlord in the making, Who knows?
Well, let's just put it this way: I have the legs from a Dune walker from my Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about taking the legs and making the 4 struts for legs out of that, and make a drop ship out of it, carve it up, and
Sweet.
Eventually, I do plan on going on to map scale dropships after I'm finished doing all my terrain. Eventually, that could be years from now. It could be a decade later, and you could be talking to me about it.
So next month, right?
Yeah, sure.
So we got a couple more comments, and I suggest we probably should get on with our first topic because we got lots of stuff to chat about tonight still. We've got Mel says, they make food printers now. I think I'll print up a T-bone. Okay.
Maybe a little extra, little vegetable protein tossed in there, stirred up, and
there you go.
Little chew.
Dan says, I've seen some incredible resin prints for 10 millimeter Warmaster minis, the old GW game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so even at that scale, even 10 millimeter, some pretty nice stuff coming out.
There was some stuff on this, what is it? The one show that's the English show I watch all the time, The Weekender. The guys on Tabletop. They were about a month or two ago. They had some 10 mil Warmaster miniatures that were 3D printed. They were talking about them, so looked pretty detailed to me.
Cool. Well, this is actually our first topic isn't entirely out of the whole manufacturing discussion, and so this could be a short topic depending on people's opinions on this. It is one of those very controversial discussions, and I thought it might be fun just to, even if it does go quick, just to have a chat about it. And so recasting, in the sense of production, of stuff, good, bad. Is there times where context to it? Like, is there times where it matters more than other times? Just what are everybody's thoughts on that? And so, would somebody like to open up with that one, or?
Well, should we open up that can of worms and step inside? Well, I gotta get rid of this pop up here. Man, not my night.
Well, freeze. There you go. He's still moving.
Hey.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I'd say there's was it about 5-6 years ago? There was this the Chinese place. What is it? It's kind of AliExpress, I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
There was about 5-6 years ago when I first heard about it, and I just tooling around, and I was like typing in Forge World miniatures, and AliExpress popped up, and it was like, what's all this? And I started looking, and it was nothing but coming out of China. 100% was all these remolded stuff. Everything that was from Forge World was there. You could get every Forge World model you wanted coming out of China because they don't have any copyright laws. I'm like, wow. It's like we're talking pennies on the dollar. It's like you can spend $300-400 on a Forge World model, which I have some Forge World models that I spent some good change on. And then I'm like looking at this and I'm like, holy crap. It's like, how are they even making money off this as cheap as it is? Like, what are they doing? So it's like, if it is I have to say, if it's a current model that is in production, to me, that's just, you're just stealing from the company, 100%. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. Now, there's a whole bunch of miniatures that are no longer production, and I don't think they may have the molds. They're not putting them out on the market anywhere. Is that fair game? Maybe. It's hard to say, but there's
so
still.
We got a maybe. We already got a maybe. I'm
not sure exactly.
Slipping.
They got the IP laws, copyright laws, and all that. But I can see people, it's kind of nefariously start producing this stuff and putting it out like eBay every once in a while. Not in mass production, but I can see it happening.
And also, I guess with the recasting. The assumption is we're talking about for sale, I guess, because, like there are some people that might even say like recasting. I mean, for personal use, like, is that even an issue? I don't know. Now,
if let's say you need an arm or something that is you got a model. It's like even Nick, Necron Nick, I'll just call him that way. And, he's like, I needed this part. And then he would cast it himself and make a part that he needed out of an existing part so he could, customize something. I don't have a problem with that because you're customizing miniatures for yourself. You're not selling it. You're not making a profit. It's like they went down the banhammer of selling off the bits,
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a big market on eBay at one time where, oh man, I need this gun off this tank so I can put it on my orc, so I can orcify and make my custom orc stuff here. I'd go to, eBay and it's like, oh, there it is. May pay, let's say $5 for it instead of spending the $50-$60 for the entire kit for the one piece I wanted. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. But it's another, just like if you now have the capability of making a mold for yourself and then putting it in there, casting it, and then using it for your own stuff, I don't have a problem with that myself. But
so that's for your first shot at this, Rusty. What's your first thoughts, Dwayne?
It's a bit of a sticky one. Personally, for me, I don't see the point in buying recast stuff for myself personally, because it's sort of an Irish part of the hobby for me is collecting miniatures. So like I'm into 40k orcs. I don't see the point in collecting stuff that isn't original. I've no interest in it for me personally. But I can understand why others would want to sort of go down that path. But there's like I've been gifted recast before, and I've literally been like giving it away to someone because I'm like I just it doesn't, for me personally, it sort of defies the point of collecting.
Do you put it in a paper bag and not touch it with your hands? Like you kind of just
I'm like,
they give it to you and you kind of wrap it up and then
it burns the skin.
I was like, what the hell is this? It's made of resin, it's supposed to be plastic, and I was like, ooh. But
keep it secret. Keep it safe.
It's a double-edged sword, though. You know what I mean? No, I was literally. I told one of my friends, I'm like, I'm thinking about destroying this. He's like, no, I'll take it. I'm like, all right, you do what you want with it, whatever. It is a double-edged sword. Like, so for me personally, it sort of defies the point of collecting. But for other people, I can understand, especially as what Rusty was saying, where there's another production model, they don't make it anymore. You know what I mean? Like, there's several really nice orc resin miniatures that they just don't make anymore. Like I have a couple of them, like the Orc Battle Fortress, big kits, quite a few of the Forge World kits that I have that are still in packaging, I'm ashamed to say, they don't make anymore. So I can understand people wanting a product and not wanting to pay several $100s for something that cost 50 or 60 bucks when it was still in production. I can understand why people want to go down that path, but for me personally, it's not my cup of tea. But I'm not gonna beat people over the head for it if they want to do it themselves.
Yeah. Now there's the Lucius Warhound Titan. Forge World quit making it, and the only place you can get a actual copy of one is out of Russia. Somebody's selling them. They're repopping the things and selling them. It's like, if I ever wanted one, I know where I can get them. You're talking what, $150 you can get one or something like that. When you're talking a $400 or $500 model, I can understand why people would go out of their way to do that.
Mm.
But it's a model that's no longer production at all anywhere. So it's like, okay, I can see why it's like, if you prefer this one over the other Titan, it's like, yeah, okay, but this one looks so much cooler, but they don't make it anymore. Why? I don't know. So I can understand why people go that route. But
yeah, I don't, my opinion doesn't really change much from you guys as far as I've never bought a recast and I've never been gifted one. I have printed a little Epic Warhound Titan, like on the 3D printer, free thing. And I guess it's not really a recast of any actual model that was made. No. It's really just somebody's interpretation of like what one looks like. And I mainly did it just to see if I could do it and like what it would look like, in the end, the design. But it wasn't really like I have my Warhounds my Warhounds are from Forge World. Actually, I got them from somebody else. I didn't buy them from Forge World, but they're actual little Forge World Warhounds for Epic Armageddon. But I guess I was curious. I mean, like, I totally agree with the idea that you don't want to really shaft designers. You know, like when they hire artists at really decent salaries, like to make a living, you know, at like somewhere like Games Workshop, and then that's part of the price, to actually have somebody else just sort of copy that, eliminate the designer, you know, altogether, and just try to make money on the end product. You know, we all see a problem with that and just intellectual property. One of the things that came up, one of the reasons this really came in my mind when we were thinking about this topic this week is I was perusing the Old Hammer forums, and there's a zero tolerance policy for most of the Old Hammer collectible Facebook groups for recasts. Like, it so much so that it's like the quickest way you could be banned is to even speak positively of recasts. Like, if, you know, like, you don't even have to try to do that act, like, you know, like try to sell a recast or do something with a recast. If you even like talk about recasts and like how you think that they should be like fine, all this stuff, like you get banned, you know, like they're that strict about it. And so, you know, like there was a thread recently where they didn't ban somebody, but they did say like, just, you know, tread lightly here, you know, because this is totally against what this group is about. So the collectible market with recasts is another kind of component to this. And you started to touch on this, Dwayne, when you were saying how you collect the orcs and like you wouldn't really have any interest in them. And that kind of leads me to my thought, like with the Old Hammer stuff, you have stuff that physically lasts because it's metal for really long periods of time. Like it's around since, you know, in some cases the late 70s, you know, they have miniatures from. And the point for some of the folks on there is that it is a collectible market. And if I just spent like, and I don't think you should spend $500 on a miniature, but if I just spent $500 on a miniature because I really wanted this and I wanted this design and I can't get it anymore, you know, all of a sudden if the next day, like you can get thousands of them, you know what I mean? Like in resin, you know, or whatever, like just totally copied in resin, whatever. Like what does that do to, you know, all the true collectibles out there, you know, and how does it affect things? Now, there are some folks that are not collectors, that are gamers, and like they have a strong counter. Like they're like, I don't care, like that's your problem. Like, you know, I'm a gamer, I just want to be able to feel this stuff on the table. It's out of production, so I want to be able to get it and put it on the table or whatever. Like, you know, there's this like two different sides. But if you're really immersed into the old stuff and you collect it and you at times pay a bit of a premium, and it doesn't even have to be $500. It can be that you're just paying a little bit of a premium, you know, to get this stuff. It dilutes the original designs and what they have. And I'm not saying that argument is ironclad, like this collectible argument. Like but I think they have a point, you know, for sure, you know. And so it's interesting because then on the other side, if you happen to have a game, and there are games where stuff's out of print and it's still being used, and we don't even have to go as far as GW. Like I have them actually, but I just never painted them yet. But I have like for Saga, the Skrellings, which are like the Native American. They're like kind of like the Inuit, you know, that you could fight against Vikings and stuff. And you had in the first, it was a limited edition release by Gripping Beast, and those are limited, right? And so you still, they released a board that you can use in the latest Saga for it. And you could, you know, somebody could just go and just copy all that stuff, just, you know, or get recast because you can't buy them anymore. But there's still, you have the ability to still play them in the new rules. And so is it wrong if they're not releasing them anymore? They were limited to actually recast that stuff. You know, for some folks, they would say, like what people here are saying is they're out of print, like you can't get them, but I want to play them in the game, so what do I do? What do you guys think?
Yeah,
that's
Well, you're going down one of two paths. Either you're going to have to make proxies yourself, or you're going to have to get recasts. There's no two ways about it, really. You know?
Yeah, it's like I can understand when you look at, say, Games Workshop, you know, where they basically, in say their 40K rules, they have actually said that all the old stuff is gone. You know, it's like they basically, through their own writing, have phased out so they can move on, and maybe that's their way of handling the old cast stuff, so that you're no longer fighting over trying to field that kind of kills the market in one way, other than just pure collectors. But I have to say, it's like if you're looking at a Forge World model and it's made out of resin, once that person paints it up, how do you know it came from China or did it come from England? Unless you're looking at it and the quality is, it's like, you look at one, it's like, oh, there's a lot of bad mold lines. But I've gotten some stuff from Forge World that had bad mold lines, and I had to send it back, or say, not send it back, but say, look at this, I need some replacements. So they'll take care of you. But they like to have their customers happy because you're spending a pretty penny for something.
Yeah.
And I got some of those Pegasus Knights, you're talking $300 a pop for those little guys. And, they're going to make sure that those guys that are forking out that kind of change for those things are going to be happy.
Yeah. And you can get stuff, like, particularly in the days, as somebody that really likes metal, I hate to say this, but like particularly in the days when most of the stuff from GW was metal, I mean, you can get some mold lines that were bad in one batch versus another. And like I've gotten stuff from Warlord Games that was horrible and I've sent it back. But you can get all that stuff in between, and it doesn't have to be a recaster. That's a quality issue.
Now I've seen, with BattleTech, where some years ago we had a individual that was going around and recasting all the BattleTech miniatures and putting them out there, and they were selling them dirt cheap, and people would buy them, and so then they get them and go, man, this thing sucks. It was horrible.
BattleTech. He said BattleTech.
I thought they did.
Well, why don't we go to our comments?
I'm going to make sure there's nothing on the floor before the end of this session.
Yeah.
That I might fall on at this rate,
You didn't set up pillows all around your chair.
I did a little bit of drinking while I was sitting there watching my black screen earlier. So
we've got so Mel says, I think that the blatant copying of a production model is wrong, but I also feel that close enough is a viable way to go if it's an original.
Well, yeah, it's like you got some proxy, you get third-party companies that will produce something that's almost identical, but it's not the same model. I can see that. Yeah. If that's what you're talking about.
And I don't think proxying is wrong, like, in that sense, I just guess that more has to do with, sometimes people will talk about, like, are you allowed to bring non-GW models to GW games? And to me, that's a little bit of a different discussion, than blatantly recasting a miniature, because like if you find an alternative miniature that's meant to represent it, in some ways that really depends on your community, the store, and the gaming group, and all of that kind of stuff. Like that's a bit of a different discussion in my mind, but it is not direct copying, as Mel said. And then he says out of production / print would be okay if the license is not being used. A license usually closes out after 10 years if it's not maintained. So,
yeah, we're talking, it's like a lot of that GW stuff. If it hasn't been in production then for 10 years, is it fair game?
The recast is low.
I know Dan, I think, is still here, but I'm just going to throw this out to him because he's just released a video on his Bretonians. He has this army that he's saved and collected and added to and like really kind of fawned over, like I do with my Beastmen, for fantasy. And, a lot of it, it's not that the rarity alone makes you really like it, but once you start getting stuff that's hard to find and because you really like it, and so do others, and then it's old and it becomes hard to find and it's all bought up, but then you get more of it and you look for a really long time and you spend a fair bit of money. And once you kind of go through all of that hamster wheel of that, and then all of a sudden, like, you can get it out of like Beijing for like $50, the whole thing I like made out of resin. Like, don't tell me that doesn't bother you, Dan, if you're still there. Like, like even if you already have it, like even if you have it and you've done all of that, and then all of a sudden they just release a plastic set of it, that's like a total recast. Like, don't tell me that you wouldn't be doing about face if you saw somebody at the store with one of those.
Well, which brings up an interesting point there is that when this stuff was being printed in China, a lot of the plastic miniatures, they were coming out of the factory. I remember seeing a lot of those same miniatures were being sold on the AliExpress as plastic miniatures. So they were probably just continually printing them off out of the factory and just selling them secondhand right out the back door.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We got one more comment here. Brad says, I have the limited edition Revenant from Saga, which is another limited edition like the Skrellings I mentioned, but I think they re-released them, which they did in so the company re-released them, which is fair, and that was actually to support the Age of Magic release, like the fantasy release, because it was really more, like kind of it was really like an experiment for them, like in regular Saga, to have fantasy-based kind of things in the first edition. It wasn't really the norm, whereas when they released a proper Age of Magic, they brought them back. He says, I think they really released them. Are inspired miniatures the same as recasts? I don't really think so. I mean,
No.
Personally,
no.
I wouldn't say so. I'd say directly copying something and casting off of it would be different than being inspired by a miniature and doing something from scratch yourself. There's a different level of skill and effort required.
If you have the capability and skill to actually design a 3D printable resin miniature yourself, it looks similar to it, that you become the artist yourself, and if you're selling that kind of stuff, that's a different whole story. But if you're taking a miniature and then actually making a mold out of it, taking the original, make a mold, then spinning it up yourself, then that's another beast.
Just to tag on to that, before we get to Dan's response on his Bretonians, do you guys remember when there was the big lawsuit that everybody was talking about for 40K when
Chapter House?
That's it. That's the one. I was losing kind of in my head who it was, but it was Chapter House, and so that was a really pivotal moment because they went to bat for everybody else in a lot of ways and through self-preservation against GW, but then in the end, as I remember it, GW kind of lost in the end, because almost everybody started producing stuff after that. But in my mind, that was around inspired stuff because they weren't directly recasting, because we're talking about the greatest evil here in some ways. They were making replacements, and they were making stuff that you could use in the 40K universe, which Games Workshop had a problem with. But as I remember it, they were not making actual recasts.
No, it wasn't recast stuff to the best of my knowledge. From what I know, back in that era of time, the Chapter House lawsuit had massive repercussions in the hobby in regards to Warhammer. Myself being an orc player, we felt it pretty bitterly, because back then there was it was the age of, there was rules given for miniatures, but no miniatures produced for them, and the hobbyist was kind of expected to. So there was these holes in the miniature line that weren't fulfilled by Games Workshop. So third-party manufacturers filled in those gaps. And a large part of the lawsuit was Games Workshop was like, this is our idea, our concept, and they were trying to sue them in that regard. And that fell down because they didn't actually produce miniatures for it. The end result being anything that didn't have a miniature no longer had rules. They threw their toys out of the pram. They pulled the carpet out from underneath people, and it systematically changed the hobby altogether. Quite literally, the rule set now is if it's not on the sprue, it doesn't get rules for it. Whereas previously there was a lot more creativity involved. So it's as an orc player, it's a bit of a sore point talking about it, but it's interesting, hobby wise, the history of it.
See, to me, go ahead, Rusty.
Yeah, that's where we had all these companies were producing product that could be glommed onto existing GW miniatures. So if you want to customize your stuff, and they were producing willy-nilly all kinds of stuff that will allow you to make those holes in a line using existing miniatures and put them together.
Because my thought is like, if you look at the term inspired, like, as we're talking, like Brad mentioned, inspired, if somebody designs sculpts and calls them forest elves instead of wood elves, and if they're basically, you could use them as wood elves, like basically they have guys with bows, and then we have a guy that's like riding on a hawk, and like we have like basically stuff you can use. From my perspective, as long as they paid a sculptor to sculpt that, and to me, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I realize there's some IP components. It's a bit shady there, but at the same time,
well, that's where you have a generic name. It's like Space Marine can't be copyrighted because Space Marine has been around long before there was ever Games Workshop.
And that's why it shifted. That's why we had the shift, like the Chapter House lawsuit. It's like orcs became Oryx, and Eldar became Eldari, and Imperial Guard became Astra Militarum. Space Marines became the Astartes. That's like that Chapter House lawsuit had a big effect on it, massive effect,
massive knock-on effect down the line where everything got changed. All the names got changed so they could copyright stuff where they couldn't copyright before, because they took it and tried to copyright a lot of stuff, and it was like, no, you can't copyright that because that's a generic name that's common use before you came around.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's interesting. Like when you talk about IP, and I realize that's not what our topic is about tonight. It comes into it, but if I haven't thought about this heavily, but really, if you have a strong enough IP, most of the time, if instead of like a Darth Vader miniature, you have like the Black Evil Knight, and then like, and it doesn't look like Darth Vader, but it kind of resembles, there's no way Star Wars fans are going for it. If it's a strong enough IP, there's no way that instead of Iron Man, you have like Automatic Man, and and that looks kind of like somewhat similar, but not exactly the same. And like, I'll use him instead in my Marvel Crisis Protocol. You'd be laughed out of the shop, right? And so in most cases, it kind of takes care of itself. But where the IP is a little more generic, is where you kind of run into the issue of having a forest elf instead of a wood elf, right? And then all of a sudden, it becomes a little bit more of a problem. But then to me, that really, I guess in one case, the answer, I don't really think it's a stronger IP, but the Eldari is the answer. Like we're going to call him Eldari instead of Eldar. But then also, yeah. But then also, I think the issue is you still have to make a better product. Like if you want people to buy it, then you have to make a better product. And sometimes it's just about competing at that level too. I don't know.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who make third-party miniatures for the Orc faction. I know I keep talking about it, but that's my touchstone into 40k. I genuinely don't collect any of the other factions, and there are third-party providers like the resin miniature I showed you beforehand. He could proxy Gazgul if you wanted to, but he's nothing like him. He's just a big miniature. He's also an Orc, but it's the sculpts aren't anything the same. Nothing about them is kind of the same. There's a lot of third-party producers out there who do sell alternative miniatures, and it is that case though. It's like in order for them to actually sell stuff, they need to be on par with what's already produced by Games Workshop or better. You know what I mean? To draw people to their product, it needs to be up there. Like,
are you referring to the Space Oryx?
No, some people call them orcs or whatever. Like there's orcs with a C, orcs with a K. I think Games Workshop's new fantasy IP'd version is Oryx.
It's Oryx. Oryx.
Yeah. Thankfully they haven't called them that. Yeah, they're still ORK, but it's like it all comes from Lord of the Rings. Like if you talk to the guys who created it, it's pretty much like Lord of the Rings in space. So
exactly.
Can't really complain.
Well, let's get to a couple of comments here. So Dan says, that would bother me a bit, Palmer. What bothers me more is that GW won't make them available again on a made-to-order or limited run. Sort of leaves people in a corner.
Yeah.
And he says, there are lots of Bretonnian-inspired sculpts out there, which are really good. Totally acceptable to me for sure. I think most people are fine with that. And Bretonnians are just 100 Years War miniatures that are given a dose of fantasy, so that can't really be copyright. Definitely send GW down their current path. But having said that, and I realize I kind of stepped into that one a little bit because you're right. I mean, they're using that as an example that your Bretonnians, they're kind of still, like you said, like rooted in historical, but they still have the Green Knight, and you still have lots of characterful models that you wouldn't see in 100 Years War stuff that are highly collectible. I mean, oh my gosh, the Green Knight, like for one miniature, like the amount that I've seen that thing go for, it's highly desirable. And when you just see, if you were to just all of a sudden start seeing like knockoffs, you know, everywhere, and you paid like, I don't know how much it was, but I think it'd be reasonable to say like $70 or something like that for one guy on horseback. You know, it would be pretty, and it would annoy me for sure.
No, you definitely, when you look at the Bretonnians, they GW definitely just went and say, hey, there's the Arthurian age on all the mythology that goes with it. Let's just grab it all up and just change a few, change the name just slightly, and then there you go. That's
the Perry twins did a lot of the sculpting for the Bretonnians, didn't they? The plastic archers and stuff like that. See, I think they were pretty coy and crafty about it. So they were doing a miniature line for Warhammer Fantasy, but those guys are big into historicals. Yeah, so I reckon they specifically went for a generic enough design for the miniatures to be grabbed up by historical players. I think they specifically did that. I think they pulled a fast one on GW, because the Bretonnians are like, I really loved the Bretonnians when I first got into Warhammer Fantasy, for me, because they were the least fantastical. They were the most sort of realistic. I've said this before and I've said it again. I think my problem has always been that I was a historical wargamer who didn't discover historical wargamer until it was like too late, like, you know what I mean, into my 30s or something.
I mean, to me, those Pegasus Knights are like a perfect example of that, you know.
But there's not many
it's
elements.
Just a matter of science.
Well, the Pegasus Knights would have been a later release, though. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like in the era where it was like, I think it was like 4th or 5th edition. So like, this is out of my first batch of miniatures. Obviously, it's not painted, but I got it in the starter set where it's just the Bretonnian archer, and it's like he's a generic archer you can use in a historical set. Back then, there wasn't much. Like, it was just, I think, like the hippogriff. There wasn't many like fantastical monsters and stuff. Those Pegasus Knights didn't come until later, but then the aesthetic of Bretonnians totally changed. They went to this sort of mad relic sort of, they totally changed at that stage.
Yeah, they went from the Crusade foot sergeant style infantry and all that stuff, and then they started actually fantasizing them up more. Yeah, you can tell that we had different sculptors coming in and changing things up by that 6th edition.
Yeah. Brad says, great topic. Yeah, it actually has been a good topic. We've been kind of hitting it from a lot of different areas. No, and I think if you go to Dan's videos and on his Bretonnians, you'll see there's like a ton of historical folks that come in and are like, oh, I love the Bretonnians.
I told you, man.
Primarily historical channels, you know.
It's almost like they were sculpted by historical nuts, like, you know, the guys that like the Perry twins, like they're really big into their historical stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What I thought you were going to say when you said, you know, what I really think they were doing, I thought you were going to say is I think they were making them so they could use them in their own games.
Probably, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it's,
most definitely. You can tell. It's like, oh, we need a whole bunch of Crusade-style infantry. It's like, I have an idea.
I'd really like some of these type of miniatures. Wouldn't they be great for this period of time? Oh, the company we work for just so happens to want something slightly like that. You know, make the most of it. Why not, lads? You know,
we could get paid for this and make them for our games. Dan says, good stuff, Scarnier. The 5th edition Bretts were my favorite by far.
Yeah, they were cool, man. They drew me into the game. That was like the first starter set I bought, was that 5th edition one with the Bretonnians and the Saurus. Literally, like my first boxes of wargaming material ever was the starter paint set with Bretonnian archers, and then 2 Knights of the Realm. That's literally how I started wargaming back in like '97.
Do you still have them?
The Knights of the Realm, no. Sadly, this lonely archer is the last one I have left. I traded them off, or I sold them in my misspent youth. They were mostly unpainted. I was afraid. I didn't know how to paint horses. I was kind of afraid of trying to paint them and ruin them. So they were mostly grey or a white primer. You know what I mean? So it wasn't much of a sight to behold.
But I saw a lot in them.
I loved them, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. When they're yours, right?
Yeah.
Heck, I still got those 4th edition goblins that, because I had a whole bunch of them, like 2 boxes worth. There's a whole bunch of them. They're still not painted. So what can you say?
Yep. Well, I think that's been a good topic. I think we've hit that from a lot of different areas. I think we overall said like direct recasting, not good. Like we don't think it's good. But I think that we also kind of alluded to a gray area, of when like a game is still being produced and like the company no longer, makes miniatures for it, for a particular faction or something, but you can still technically play it. And then all of a sudden, what do you do? And, the question is I guess we're kind of ending it. We don't need to throw another curveball, but like this idea of making money on something that you didn't ever have the IP for, like how much should you be able to do that? I don't know. It kind of leads to a lot of questions, but in the end, I think we kind of addressed the major issues with it from our side and and like the folks in the commenting.
Not our cup of tea, but we understand how people could go down that path pretty much.
Yeah, we can definitely see why they go down the dark side.
I think BattleTech had a problem with that recently with 3D printing too, huh?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Then the banhammer came down and said, "You shall not pass."
Yeah, it's understandable though. There was people. It was filling a gap. I can understand why it was happening because a lot of the old sculpts were like from the 80s and such. So people wanted updated sculpts that weren't happening. But now we're in the era where we're getting updated stuff. So, the gap that sort of filled for the time being, it no longer really serves a function to be having 3D printed designs of BattleTech stuff.
Yeah.
So I understood why it was there for the time it was there, but, that time's passed.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when the Mech Warrior Online came along, and people wanted seeing all these nice new sculpted mechs on online and everything. They're like, why can't we have these? Why can't our mechs look like this? And that's when suddenly it's like, I have the capability of doing this for you.
Yeah.
Rusty, I'm starting to get a little nervous. I'm looking at your room here and I see a lone red balloon there.
That's not a balloon.
It's not a balloon?
It's off an Easter egg. Did you not get the reference when I was talking to him about a potential overlord? I spotted it straight away.
It's a dragon egg.
Oh, okay.
There are certain egg-shaped dropships in BattleTech. I knew exactly what he was doing with that. I see what's going on here.
So that's
we already talked about this.
That's not from it. Okay, I thought that looked like a balloon just sort of like tipped up there on your table.
No, it's an egg, like Easter egg. And I already talked about what I plan on doing with this. Is like I'm gonna cut 4 notches in the bottom here. I got some landing gear from a dune crawler.
Oh, there we go. Yep, that's Dwayne's showing it there at the same time. Okay, see, I don't know it enough, and so I don't know it enough, and so I know it, the movie, but not the it you're talking about. Yeah. And so that's why I didn't get the reference.
Yeah, it's an egg-shaped dropship. That's what he's going for.
So when you said Overlord, I didn't know what you were talking about. I just kind of thought you were just joking around or something. So
no, I got.
You're filled in now.
My walkers from Deptus Mechanicus.
Yeah.
They got the 4 legs. I have an extra set of legs that I plan on cutting the holes out, put the landing gear down, use the legs as landing gear, so it can sit down on the ground. And then I'm going to take really thin plastic card and glue it on here.
Skim it. Yeah.
And give it panels and all that stuff. And
you just put your head on the table. Just put your head on the table.
Eventually, probably that's a project I plan on doing this summer.
Cool.
So, being that we have Easter, these things are found everywhere in all the stores. So
Yeah.
it's like happening the other day. I was picking up a poster. You can see it right there.
Mm-hmm.
See my little poster right there, the new one that's in the corner.
Oh yes, yes.
My
From your show.
The Expanse.
Yep.
I needed
sweet,
a new.
yeah.
I needed a frame for it, and I was like walking by, and like, oh, and it was like a massive bin where these things were like $2 a piece, and there was like 30 or 40 of them sitting inside this bin.
An armada.
Yeah,
Of
you only need
overlords.
one though.
Yeah, you only need one. Like my head's already racing. I'm thinking how to like get the sheet styrene to sort of stick to it. You're gonna hit it with like a Scotch Brite pad and
Yeah, I'm gonna
heat up a
sand
bit
it first with like a 300 grit, sand it down, and then go from that route, and then just glue panels on. And now the big thing, if I had a 3D printer, I could have somebody print me off a little round bubbles for where the weapons pods go.
the turrets. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I had somebody with that kind of skills with printers, I could do that.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I think resin would be good for that.
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
if it's going to be
Yeah.
round, resin would be quite good. But yeah. Well, we have another topic coming up here, and I don't know, Rusty, do you want to kind of lead in on this one since I led on the last one? Or?
Well, yeah, I could do that. We have. We were discussing what our last show we had what our top 5 movies, right? The horror movies, and it got us thinking about what are our top 5 or 5 fantasy type games that we like to play or haven't played or like to play. What kind of that genre that we.
I believe it was Todd in the last show that suggested he'd like to know what the top 5 fantasy games are that we think.
Each.
Yeah.
That we've personally played or that we'd like to play.
Well, it's fairly generic. And so in some ways, I would say answer it any way you want. Just preface like how you're gauging
the reasons for why things
Yeah,
are
yeah,
listed.
'cause-
I have
'cause
5. I barely speak
I
5.
have 5 too. And like I have a philosophy is how I chose them, because I think that could really change the way you say it, as far as, and sometimes the way you'd recommend to other people, like the top 5 versus what you would play are different too. That might sound weird, but I guess I'll go first. I guess I'll just say for that in mind is that like I have games that I don't play a lot of different games of every genre. Like I don't have a horde of games that I play. And so because of that, it limits me from personal experience to say like, these are the 5 fantasy games I routinely play. Because there aren't 5 fantasy games that I routinely play. And when I say fantasy, I'm limiting to sword and sorcery in this. Like I'm not talking about like it's fair game. If you want to say fiction, interpret that way, then that's fine too. But I'm just looking at like sword and sorcery style fantasy, like not sci-fi. Like I would do a different list for sci-fi.
There's fantasy, high fantasy.
You could do whatever you want. But like I play like one of the ones I'm really looking forward to is like AD&D battle systems. Now, but if a bunch of people asked me like, what do I think the top 5 games are out there? Like, what should they play? This and that. I probably wouldn't mention this because a lot of this is built in nostalgia. It's because I want to see the old AD&D tables and monsters. It's very old. There are a lot of people that wouldn't want to play it, depending on what you're interested in. So it wouldn't be like, this is the game I recommend for you, like, because this is what I'm playing like now, Warhammer Fantasy, like 6th edition, like that's another one, there's a number of them that I might play, but that I wouldn't necessarily say are the top 5 games out there for everyone. Because it really just depends on what you like. And from my perspective, I mean, there's still mass battle versus skirmish, like there's all of these other things you have to consider as to, how you recommend something for someone. And so if we go around and just like, I'm going to sort of pick what I think seem to be the ones that are kind of really popular now, that have done well, that have attracted an audience that seems to be warranted, like not just because it's popular, but seems to have something new, or something different that seems cool. And if I was to start with number 5, if we were going to do it like we did with the movies, where we each kind of say our top 5, our number 5 first, I was going to say Dragon Rampant, which happens to be one that I do play in this instance. And where I would put Dragon Rampant out there as a great fantasy game to play is that if you want a simple, inexpensive, easy to read, like kind of like rule set to play a quick game. It's pseudo mass battle. It doesn't require a lot of miniatures, but you can use any miniatures you want. Like a lot of new games that are coming out, like you can choose your miniatures to be represented in the game. And I think it's a good game. Like, do I think it's the best fantasy game out there? No, I don't. But do I think that actually it fills a niche extremely well? I think it does. Like, I think it's got that quick entry, lots of fun, does things a little bit differently with its system to allow any miniature in there. You have like units and strengths, as opposed to just like lots of individual characters, and things like that. And it allows a lot of freedom to create your own kind of units and creatures and things. And I think it's good. And so I would recommend it to people, like in certain instances, as a great game to play for fantasy. And so
I agree that was one of my first experience really with kind of a mass combat fantasy system.
Dragon Rampant?
No.
Were you just saying that was one of your first experiences?
No, it's like I was thinking of something else. But
okay.
You're prefacing off of what you were talking about, the AD&D, then going with
the battle
Dragon.
systems. Yeah. So like battle systems, I'm not including today in my top 5. But it's one of the top 5 I'm going to play. But is it one of the top 5 I think is the best out there for everyone? Not necessarily. I think that's the distinction I make. I think I could just repeat the same things I say on this show every week, and everybody would know what my answers are tonight. Like, what are the games I'm playing? Those are my top 5, and then it's just kind of boring. Like, I'm actually more interested in tonight in just ranking my top 5 as what do I think are the best ones that people are enjoying out there right now, that the most people would potentially enjoy, just based on what people are getting into these days, what the kids are into.
Get off my lawn, yellow.
Or the young kids and the old kids. So
kids of all ages.
So you opened up, Rusty. So what about you, Dwayne? What are you? What's your number 5, and what's your reasons for how you're?
See, when you were telling me to do like a list of 5 fantasy games, I was trying to reference what I've played, and I've a very limited scope of fantasy games I've played, and then I wasn't too sure if you were talking just solely war games or just fantasy games in general. Mm-hmm. So like I have a mixed bag of stuff. There's some things I've only played 1 or 2 games of. There's some things that I owned and I haven't played, but I really would love the opportunity to play. And there's some games I know of, but that are popular and that people have played. They're supposed to be like games that I've been interested in but never got the opportunity to. And then there's other rule sets that they're based off of other rule sets I like. So like I'll talk about, there's a couple of games that I'd be interested in but I haven't played. So I've heard quite a lot about Saga, and there's quite a lot of people playing Saga, and I've heard good things about it. Frostgrave as well, I've heard.
So we're going number 5 first. You're jumping.
These
through.
Are 5. These are all sort of.
No, but we're doing 5. So like you say you're number 5, and then Rusty says his number 5. You don't run through your list. You're gonna get us off the show.
These are sort of like peripherals, all right?
Oh, so this isn't your number 5 yet?
No, this isn't me. Like number. Okay. It's a weird list. It's okay. My number 5 is there's 3 games I'd like to try. Okay, Frostgrave and Saga I'd like to try, and I haven't. Okay. But the one I'm really interested in is Warlords of Avalon, because it's supposed to be based off of the bolt action system that they use, and I've played that and I like it. So I've been tempted several times to buy it, but I haven't pulled the trigger. So we'll say Warlords of Avalon is number 5. Sure. Haven't played it yet, but I want to.
That's an interesting one. I think that's a good point.
With Warlords, I have heard things about it. I've seen things about it, but I've never actually sat down and watched a video or anything about how it's played. And now that you say it's like bolt action, I was like, I played bolt action. That could be interesting. I could see myself maybe delving into that if I could find time. But I got plenty of other miniatures.
If I could find time. That's all of our problem, right?
Yeah.
So much stuff out there. It's like
I'm a sucker for a skeleton horde, so like the Children of the Hydra is like a soft spot for me. Straight away, I was like, was it the? It's not Jason and the Argonauts, is it? I think it's based off of the sculpt, that old film from back in like, I don't know when, like the 60s or the 70s. There was a lot of stop motion animation.
Yeah.
The sculpts are the guys, like, so the necromancer is the guy, you know what I mean? It's all, the visuals are based off of that. So I thought that was really cool as well. Like, so I'd like to get my hands on it. I really would. There'd probably be no one in the area to play it, but I'm very interested for some reason.
Absolutely. And then sometimes with those kind of things, I like to just get it with like a starter set with 2 sides, just so like I can get into it and quench that wanting to try it, and then just invite a friend to play or something, and sometimes that's the easiest way when you don't have a taker, is just to like give them some painted miniatures to play. So how about you, Rusty? What is your number 5, and how did you approach it?
Well, my whole thing was like, I wrote down all the fantasy games I played before. All right, to go off that list and say, all right, which ones could I see myself continue playing, if I could find people doing it, if I still had the miniatures. And then I went, it's like, okay, then there's a whole bunch of other ones that are kind of roundabout that I would like to see done. And my number 5, which I have played and I had miniatures for, and which was Malifaux. And Malifaux it's like, took me off guard because, I guess we're going back 10 years or so when it really started picking up Malifaux.
Yeah, it was big.
And it was one of those games where it was cards. It's like you just, shuffle the cards up and you go from there. And I'm like, wow, that is totally different. You don't have to worry about dice or anything. You just need a deck of cards. I still have a deck of cards Malifaux deck sitting over there. I don't have any of the miniatures anymore because it kind of died off here. People quit playing it, but it was like, man, this is a really nice. I like the miniatures. The miniatures were nice. It was a nice skirmish game. You didn't have to have a lot of stuff invested into it. That was the nice thing about it. So if you had your little crew, that's all you needed. It was like Infinity in a way for the amount of miniatures you needed.
So, yeah. You could just start with like a warband crew kind of, and it's not a huge investment. Yeah.
So just buy a rule book, you bought a crew, some peripheral crew members that you could pull in and out off the side if you wanted to, and you go from there. That was a wonderful thing about it. It was a nice game. It was nice, clean, easy to play.
Yeah. Cool. Well, why don't we try, let's do real quick to the comments here. We've got Dan says, Tabletop CP YouTube channel does some excellent battle reports for Warlords of Erewhon. And then, Brad agrees. And so how about we do number 4? Who wants to go number 4 first?
Well, you started number 4.
All right. We'll just continue clockwise here. So I did number 4 is another game I have, but I've never played, but I really like to. It's a game that I actually happened to watch a 2-hour battle report today on YouTube for it as well. But it's Burrows and Badgers. And I actually thought it actually, besides being kind of a unique setting, having the anthropomorphized animals and being like really Beatrix Potter, like storybookish, and like having some really cool aspects like that, it actually looks like a really cool game in of itself. It uses the polyhedral dice depending on the size of the animal, and so you've got some variety in combat based on different category of animal sizes and their strengths, and then you also have, there's lots of special abilities within the game that can change the dynamic of the game. You can really trick out your warband with a lot of different abilities, like I said, like in characteristics. And then it is almost like a little bit of a modern version of Mordheim in my mind. It has that sort of adventuring aspect to it and campaigning, and then also I have to read the rules again, but there's certain things where you can get critical hits if you get like 25% of less than like a certain number, like on a die, but it changes depending on whether it's a small creature or a large creature. So like I think if like the really small creatures have one, even though they have a much more of a disadvantage in combat, they have a 1/4 of a chance every time in getting a critical hit because they only use a 4-sided die. Whereas like a creature that is, let's say, using like an 8 or a 10-sided die has a much greater chance overall in combat, but they have like a 1/10 or a 1/8 chance of a critical hit. So there's really some cool dynamics to the game to make it very interesting between all of it. And so I think it's seeming to be, it's got its fans, it's not going away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it looks like a really cool game, within the fantasy genre.
I know that Dan and I both have the rule book, so and I could easily see myself playing that game.
Yeah,
it's a real simple set of rules. The miniatures, the whole concept of it is just kind of cool to me. It was it a week or two ago on Tabletop? They were talking about Burrows and Badgers and doing a mashup with another system, putting it together with Burrows and Badgers. And it's like, well, that would look cool. I'll tell you what that game is in a second here.
Okay. So how about you, Dwayne? We'll go clockwise.
Oh, my number 4. Yeah, I only got to play a game or two of it. So we're actually getting into games I've actually played more time, because it's pretty much the fantasy version of Necromunda, and I absolutely love the older editions of Necromunda. So it's like the campaign play, that sort of creating your warband and going through. I've always loved that type of stuff. Anytime I've had opportunities to play like chaos warbands and stuff like that, going through the chaos wastes, or anything that's sort of like a warband, and you just sort of, you set off small skirmish game, and you're very invested in the individual characters as you play through. So some guys will die off, other guys will get maimed. This guy, you'll get like a special weapon. It's always interesting. There's a story weaved as you play along.
Absolutely,
I like that aspect of them.
Yeah, and that's a cornerstone, of that type of game. It's like in some ways, it's hard to say that anybody's done anything first these days, but I'd almost say that they were the first to do some things. Like a lot of people refer back to that, and as that type of skirmish fantasy campaigning game, that I don't know how many there really were before Mordheim quite like that. And I think a lot of games have modeled themselves after it.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen the miniatures and stuff around, but I never had an opportunity to play it because there's nobody in our group played it, and I never seen it being played at the store. So it just like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I just never took an opportunity to do that. It looks so. That kind of brings me to number 4. My number 4 is Frostgrave. It's another skirmish game. So you get your little crew you put together. You have your wizard, you got your apprentice, and you got your little crew of little dudes. You don't need a lot of miniatures. You just take your existing fantasy miniatures if you have some, paint it up, so grab them and go play. And it's kind of like a mix between.
He's finished it. I thought you were doing a little bit of cocktail here, like Tom Cruise or whatever.
No. I was like, hold on, I'll polish this one off.
Moving on to the next.
Another warrior down.
Yeah, it's okay. Its display box can be its casket. It'll be laid to rest. We knew you well.
He's going down. But yeah, Frostgrave is Burrows and Badgers and Frostgrave mix smash up.
Oh yeah.
So you can have something where you have your little anamorphic little critters going around as your crew, playing Frostgrave together. So
why not? And it's funny because I was just thinking that all of our answers for number 4 kind of, I think we all kind of picked a very similar game for number 4. Not that there aren't still going to be more games of this type in our top 5 in earlier ones, but all of these games I think have a certain kind of a lot of commonality that we chose.
It's like our number 4 happened to be just simple, easy, quick type small game that you can just throw together without a lot of expense on your part.
Brad's sharing his. He says he just gives his here. He says he's listing his Mordheim number 5 Warlords of Erwin, 4 Burrs and Badgers, 3 Middle-earth strategy battle systems, and 2 Saga and 1 Rangers of Shadowdeep. Yep, those are good ones, all good ones, and we'll probably see some of those come up, I would imagine, because if we hold true to our lists that we've got here, we'll probably see some of those. Those are all good games. So number 3. So this is a game I haven't played, but in keeping with games that are successful, that I'm kind of like see people really enjoying and that fill a certain type of niche, I felt compelled to put Kings of War. And the only reason is I know there are some people that really like it and there's some people that don't really like it, but it actually has a big fan base, and it is kind of like a stream. I see it as like a little bit more streamlined than Warhammer Fantasy battles, but for people that like a quick play mass battle system, focusing more on the the diorama base and things like that, I think it's done very well. Since it's come out, it's held its own. And there are a lot of people that are big fans of it. And then there was a period of time when even a lot of people were really getting into the Kings of War historical as well. And that was really taking on a life of its own. So I felt a need to incorporate it. I think it is reasonable, a reasonable thing to recommend to somebody if they kind of are looking for that kind of niche.
Not to mention they make great miniatures for proxies for that other game system.
So that was
Kings of War was number 10 for me.
Okay.
So it was on my list at the very bottom, but it didn't make the list as number 10. So
yeah,
I played a few games of it so far. It's one of those games that is an entry game. It's really good for getting people into it without a lot of thinking going on in their part.
And it's funny. I mean, like in some ways, some people might just have a hard time understanding how I'm making my recommendations. But like for me, I'll be playing this every time, like over Kings of War. Like for me, that's me. But at this, and maybe that's what I should recommend to somebody else. But it really just depends on who that person is. Yeah. There are some people that absolutely would rather play Kings of War than Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th Edition. And I just it's a whole nother discussion whether like the gaming world right now is up for Warhammer Fantasy Battles in the way it was before. It's like, and if that's going to sell now and whether people are interested in it. I know there are a lot of veterans that definitely are up for it, but there are a lot of people.
Market.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think so, but everybody that talks about like the old world coming back, that there is, you'd think so, but at the same time, there are just a lot of people that really love Age of Sigmar. I can't really stand it. It's not really my thing, but there are a lot of people that really love it. And so, so I don't know. It's just, it really kind of depends on who the audience is and who you're recommending to, I think sometimes.
I'd say somewhere around 11 or 12, Age of Sigmar might have made my list. But
it doesn't have to be either or, though. Do you know what I mean? I could see Age of Sigmar sort of fills a niche, and I think Warhammer Fantasy Battles is different enough that it could also scratch, a different aspect of the hobby for other people. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be either or, but yeah, I definitely think if they were to go down that route, there's enough old hands that would definitely jump on ship. But I think some of the newer generation might be interested as well. People have only known Age of Sigmar. I'd be interested to see.
And definitely, you go into like the Warhammer Fantasy Battles forums, and there are younger people that say, no, I would rather play this even though I wasn't around when it was out. I'm looking to play this. Like that, you do have those folks that exist.
Yeah, it's something that personal preference where there's something to be looking at when you see a bunch of rank and file blocks of troops just marching along. It's like, I like that. That's what Kings of War gives you, which you're not getting anymore with a lot of these other games, is that with Kings of War, at least you're moving around blocks of troops. The mechanics isn't quite what I'd like, because we come up with fantasy, fighting it out to the duel of death. But with Kings of War, it's kind of a little bit different mechanic how they would make things. But it's like when you see blocks of troops moving around, that's something that I enjoy.
And some people like a faster pace game too.
Yeah.
Some of the older, the reality is, some of the older rule sets take a lot longer to play, like a game. I think most people would admit that. And some folks, it's funny. You'd think it would be the folks that actually have like a wife and kids at home that are waiting for them to come home, or like that are, a wife that's like looking at the clock while you're playing the game, that those are the folks that want the faster game. It's oftentimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just folks that just even are younger that just like want to come in and play a game and be done faster. That they want it to be like a board game. Like they don't want it to be like an all-day event, right? And so it doesn't always mean that it's the folk that you don't have something else to do. It's just
Most definitely.
So number 3, that was my Kings of War. How about number 3? How about you, Dwayne?
It is it's kind of a board game, but it's kind of not. It's a game that I own, but I've yet to play. But I have read the rulebook several times, and I am highly interested in playing it. And that's Games Workshop's original Mighty Empires game.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
A standalone sort of camp. Like, I have a soft spot for a good campaign system, and there's so much in that game that it's amazing. The whole hex system, for the map, this whole concept of baggage trains, having to feed your armies, fighting dragons as like it's a standalone game in and of itself, but also the fact that it facilitated Warhammer Fantasy games as well. So it was specifically designed that it's a standalone game, but every time you're having conflict with the chits that are used, the armies there, you could actually play, games of Warhammer Fantasy, and they encourage that. It was just like the detail in it, and when I got my hands on it and I got to read through the rulebook, and I was just blown away by the detail that was in it. It was that would be number 3 for me.
That's around 91, right? I think it's. Did you buy it when it came out?
I didn't buy it when it came out. I got it as a hand-me-down.
Okay. Because I had the original when it came out, but I was so young that I didn't really get enough into it. I never really got a chance to play it, but I remember it. Yeah, and it's considered to be a really good game.
I always thought it's mid to late 90s. I thought, but
I had it. I had it just when I went into college, when I was graduating high school, and I graduated in 91. So it was around then. It's that old. They may have reprinted it. Maybe they reprinted it, but I know that it was around that long.
They've done hex tile stuff with the Mighty Empires, the Mighty Empires brand, the naming. They've used the same naming, but it was merely like a plastic hex map set, which was nice in and of itself, but it wasn't a standalone game with the detailed rules for magic at the winter solstice, or what I mean, the summer equinox type of thing, and it wasn't to the same detail. My socks were kind of blown off when I discovered that many years ago.
Actually, I was wrong. It's not 1991. It's 1990.
Oh, okay.
I just looked it up. 1990. It's pretty old. Yeah, that's like Rogue Trader. Like that's like really.
So
close
it was 3 when it came out.
I was gonna say, like, I was wondering, like, did you buy that? I'm like
1990, man. I was like 26. Wow.
Walking in with a diaper. I'll take 2 of them, good sir.
Pulls out.
But I don't remember that till like the mid 90s when I remember seeing that. So.
So how about you, Rusty? What's your number 3?
Well, just to go off that, there was before I get to my number 3. Avalon Hill's Magic Realm was another hex tile type system where you'd flip the tile, move the tiles and your stuff around. I still have the game. It was a board game that was kind of similar, where you actually, it was a fantasy game, adventuring type thing going on. So it was, we had our little miniatures and uses our little guys going around.
Nice.
But that would have been the 9. My number 3, may come is a kind of one that both you may not have much experience or recognize, but Uncharted Seas.
That sounds really familiar.
It's a fantasy naval combat game from Spartan Games.
Oh, okay.
It's the game that got me into Dystopian Wars.
Oh,
I was about to say, it sounds like the guys who made Dystopian Wars, isn't it? The
That
same
was
guys.
They came out with 2 games. They had Firestorm Armada and Uncharted Seas were their first games that they had. And Uncharted Seas, I just jumped wholehearted hog into it. I was like, man, I started looking at this, and when I first played at a convention, I was like, this is fun. I like this game. This is great. You're playing a naval game, and it's fantasy. So you had orcs fighting each other. You had undead. You had like the Empire, dwarves, chaos dwarves, you name it. It was all in there. And just go fighting in, just like you had catapults on your ships, you had cannons, ballistas, you name it. Magic, shooting around, all kinds of good stuff. And I still got all the miniatures for the ships and stuff for the game. So anytime I wanted to play, I could still play a game of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun. It's really easy. The mechanics of that they had, and the same mechanics that they had with Uncharted Seas, they rolled over into Dystopian Wars for their steampunk system.
Naval component of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and most of Dystopian Wars is naval, right? It's all naval, right? There's no.
Well, it started off as naval, and then they added air and land to it also.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well,
and there's also dragons, balloons. You name it. It's like you got sea monsters. So it was kind of, I think, their take on
Man
of War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot better than Man of War.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, it sounds like they just expanded on it a lot more. Cool. Well, we'll go to number 2. For me, this was one that was mentioned, I think, in Brad's list. But my number 2 is a game I have played. I don't own, but I really enjoyed it, and I would really very comfortably recommend this to a lot of people, particularly if they're in a certain genre that they really like, and that is the Middle-earth strategy battle game, The Lord of the Rings. It has a lot of staying power. I know, from what I'm told, it hasn't changed too much since when it first came out, and that's one of the things that a lot of people like about it. Like, similar to BattleTech, a lot of people really quite like.
Wow. Excuse me.
Bless you.
A lot of people, if a game is really done well, a lot of people really like it when you retain strongly the core elements of the game over time, and I think Middle-earth strategy battle game, as I understand it, has done that, and so people really quite like the system, a lot of people, and in my experience, it does the narrative really well, in the sense of, you can have like your little scenarios like that are reminiscent of the movies and the books, and it really does that well. You don't need a lot of miniatures, but it can hit that mid-size miniatures game really quickly if you wanted to. And then I'm told that they did come out with the mass battle system component too, and I think we talked about it in a prior episode here. I've never experienced that, but I guess even more so then. That sounds great. But even playing, like, I played the more recent Hobbit Goblin Town box, where I was like, I was the goblins with like the king of the Goblin Town, like, and some of the characters from that with all the goblins going against Gandalf, and like various folks of I don't even remember who the good guys were. Like, they were humans, but basically. Yeah. It was a really fun game. It was really
Lake Town guys.
Yeah, and essentially the what I found is your heroes really get enough stuff, and like you get enough stuff you can spend to have them do great deeds and feats that they really can match up well, against your average guys. But then you can't just rely on that. It has enough that through numbers and through other things, like, you can lose, and with the regular troops and things. And so I found it was a bit of a more unique system compared to other things I played, and just in the way they handle things in the game, the mechanics, using like, I believe it's Fate and other things. But so I thought it was great. I think it's really good. It has a really strong IP. I love Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of people out there that like Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. And so I think for a fantasy game, I put it as number 2 because I think it's got the IP, it's got the mechanics, and a really good rule system. And that's really lasted for a really long time.
Now, if I had gotten into it and started playing it, that would be probably high on my list because I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan guy. And my daughter is too, and we just kind of send memes back and forth to each other about Lord of the Rings. And it was the whole concept of it is like I could see myself getting into, but we never had anybody in the group, or I'd never seen anybody playing it. So it's another system, and you see being played on. It's like when it was on YouTube, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that whole thing, but I just never seen anybody playing, so never got invested into it.
Mm-hmm. And that's
been
fair.
Tempted.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I've been tempted myself. I haven't gotten into it, but I actually bought my missus the Battle of Pelennor Fields for Christmas because she wants to get into painting miniatures and she loves Lord of the Rings. So I was like, I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you know. And I'm like, you can learn the real set and teach me. Hey,
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, I'll get a game of it in eventually. You know what I mean? You know, but yeah, it looks fun. It looks fun.
Absolutely. So how about you, Scarney or Dwayne? What's your number 2?
I have 6th edition fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy is my number 2. It's I was trying to remember back to my Warhammer Fantasy days and the editions that I played the most. It was between 6th and 7th, but I think from what I remember, I really like 6th edition. It didn't lean too heavily into magic. Mm-hmm. There were a few editions of Warhammer Fantasy. I've never really been really big into magic being a game changer. I've always kind of liked it as a nice addition, but not something that someone could lean too heavily in on. I've always kind of liked when playing Warhammer Fantasy the use of the units themselves, so blocks of units, or you know, using your stone throwers. Or I was a big fan of dwarves, so I loved using like my ball throwers and my cannons, and you know, that whole gamesmanship that comes with, you know, guessing the range, getting your cannonball to bounce and take off the back row of, you know, the night goblins that are fighting your dwarf slayers. I just have really good memories of that period of time of playing Warhammer Fantasy. So I think for me, from what I can remember, number 2 for me is 6th edition fantasy, but it seems to be a favorite with quite a few people from what you've said.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. I always looked at magic in the game for Warhammer is the frosting on the cake. You know, the cake itself is all the nice meaty dessert, and you got all the meat, you know, marching around. But you know, you always got a little bit of frosting, sweetness on the outside that can spice things up a little bit. And I definitely would say Warhammer Fantasy it's like 6th edition isn't too bad. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one I've played it recently and really like it. And I bought it when it first came out. I wasn't a player then, but I would say that everybody has their sort of favorite editions. You know, I mean, like there are some people that just absolutely love 8th. Like 8th is very popular. 6th is very popular. You know, there are some people that really like 5th edition. And then 3rd edition, like with the Oldhammer crowd, has a lot of like that. They really love 3rd edition, right? But you know, 6th is a solid edition that has a huge following. You know, there are a lot of people that really like that one, and I've really enjoyed playing it. I see myself playing this edition for a while before I pick up another one. To try something different. So,
from what I remember, it was well rounded. Like the last edition of Warhammer Fantasy I really played would have been 7th edition, and then when 8th rolled round, I kind of saw the writing on the wall because I collected dwarfs. I wasn't really into monsters and monstrous cavalry, so when I saw, you know, certain things being included in the rule set for 8th edition, I was like, it's okay. You know, you need bigger units for your bonuses, and I was able to read between the lines.
And one of the nice things is you have like all of this really cool artwork from that time.
Yeah.
This is the time of Mordheim, right? And so basically, you see a lot of there's a lot of that kind of matters too. In some ways when you like the aesthetic of the game from that time too.
Oh yeah. It's a good it's a solid book, like it really is.
Yeah, and I think I'm getting a little blurry here now, but yeah, like I think the Mordheim has that sort of it's the same time period. It has a lot of the illustrations and stuff are very similar, and it's a nice time for during the GW gaming universe, I think. So Rusty, how about you? How about number 2 for you?
Number 2, Warhammer Fantasy. Number 2 is Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah,
I'd say 4th, maybe 5th edition.
Yeah,
I've played since 3rd edition, but 4th edition was the first box that came out, and that's when it really started taking off. And we used to play that all the time at the shop, and we would have probably a game or 2 a week minimum.
Mm-hmm.
For most of 4th edition. That's why I have almost every single book there is with it, and Army to go with it, because I would play months upon months. And the nice thing about it was in 4th edition, you didn't need a lot of miniatures to play it, because the miniature themselves cost a lot in points compared to what they buy 8th edition. You're looking at 4 points for a skeleton warrior, while it was like 16 points or so in 4th edition. So you had to have 4 times as many by the time you got to the end of the period, by all the editions wrapped up. So it is a good system. I enjoyed it. I liked the magic system that they had with it in most editions and how it kind of worked its way through. It got a little heavy in I think kind of cumbersome by 8th edition with like the Winds of Magic with that, but I can see what they were trying to get the wizards to battle it out with each other in some ways. But it was a lot of fun time, a lot of fun games going with it when I played.
Yeah, good thing you didn't burn off all your armies, because you have like 8 armies, right? That would have been a major bonfire in your backyard.
Well, most of it was lead, so it would have taken a while for it to burn.
I've seen that video of that Dark Elder army. It was an interesting one. I still have a dwarf army. I still do have my dwarf army. Like I didn't sell them on, and I went mad for there's so many nice metal miniatures, the characters, a lot of the slayers and the Thanes and even the engineers. There's some really nice characters, and because they were sculpted by hand back then and they're in metal, there's a lot of character to them that I find with the newer sculpts, the newer plastic sculpts, the CAD designs. They seem a bit lifeless in that regard. Like there's a lot. I don't know what it is. There's an aesthetic to something that's being hand sculpted. There's a lot more character to them, I find.
Yeah,
so I've been reluctant to part with them.
It's the old hammer. You can go deep into the old hammer rabbit hole, like with the character sort of, and the sculpting nostalgia and aesthetic, and like from a different time. And I totally agree with you with that. Definitely. So, I mean, it is interesting how some people like sculpt today in that style, and they're making like new old miniatures. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Nice. Yeah, it's cool though. I like it.
Yeah. So, well, go ahead, Rusty.
I'll say is I think Dan said I have a museum of fantasy boxed up around my room down here. Stryker, he's another one. He has a lot of demons going back to 3rd edition and 40K. So
I'm glad you added going back to 3rd edition. I thought you were just like, he's got a lot of demons.
Don't we all?
Stryker, man, he's got a lot of demons. In going back to 3rd edition.
Preface that.
Yeah. So we'll go to comments here before we go to number 1. Dan says he's got number 5 is King of War, Kings of War, number 4 Birds and Badgers, number 3 War Master. That's an interesting one that hasn't been brought up, and that's a good one, I think, to talk about the small scale. We haven't really the small scale mass battles we haven't really touched on. 2 is Lord of the Rings, and number 1, Warhammer Fantasy 5th/6th edition. Yeah, those are all really good picks, and Warhammer Fantasy in this group is really, came out towards the top. I almost feel bad for doing the list the way I did, but these are my recommendations based on what the kids are playing.
It's too late now. You made your bed. You're gonna have to sleep in it.
Well, I'm going to continue all the way to number 1 with that. And so Mel says, I would have to say for my top 5, it's number 5, Warhammer Fantasy, number 4, Frostgrave, 3, Hordes of Things. So another small scale game, right? And that's like, for 15. 2, Armies of Arcana. So that we've seen recent action between you and Mel in games of that. And then 1, Battle of Valor Fantasy. I haven't played Battle of Valor Fantasy yet, but you must be quite interested in it. If it's hitting your number 1.
Yeah, Mel and I picked up the rule books for it. We have yet to try it out. We've kind of delved in it. Last time we played together, we were discussing it, because, we had a little bit of time to look at it. But I think it has a lot of good potential to become similar to Armies of Arcana for us to play a lot of.
Nice.
And we're finding that playing at 15 mil is a lot easier to build an army.
I've only tried like smaller scales once. I remember going back a good few years. There's a crowd of guys who play, I think it's like DBM, the smaller scale historics.
Yeah.
And I was curious enough to manage to convince one of them to give me a game one of the days. But it was, it was entertaining from what I remember. There was a lot of toing and froing in the combat and the battle line. That, but I can see you can see the advantages straight away when someone comes along with like a small enough box or an old tea box or whatever, tea chest, and that's their army. You know what I mean? And myself was playing 40k at the time and lugging everything on the kitchen sink along to play with me orcs. You know what I mean? A big horde of them.
And that's a great rule set. Like, because I played DBA a bit with a friend and did the same, used his stuff. Whereas he's got his 15 mils there. Yeah, pretty much. Like,
you look at the cost of maybe 2 boxes from Games Workshop to play fantasy with. This is right here.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty good size force.
Yeah. No, there's definite advantages. And I really like DBA, which I'm assuming is very similar to DBM. My understanding is it's really the same core system. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. Like, I'm looking forward to playing it again someday. Dan says, I just didn't like how Bretonia was portrayed in 6, but it's a solid game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you had 5th and 6th on your list there as number 1. So
the aesthetic massively shifted within the army. So I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how they look. I have a little bit of miniatures from the 5th and 6th Bretonian armies, and you can definitely tell that they went from more of the crusade style look for the Bretonians to the Arthurian style, where there's like all the fancy style army or armor. The Grail Knights, and you talk about all that fun goodiness.
Well, why don't we do our number 1s now? And this one's been mentioned already, and again, like, I put it as number 1 because of how well it's done and how much popularity, how much fun people are having with it, and just kind of. But it's not something I've played, and it would be Mordheim would be my answer for this because of what I played and what I would do, but Frostgrave is which Rusty's mentioned and was in other people's lists. I put because I just saw how when it came out, it was one of those games where it's like you can make a wargame with any kind of miniatures you want. It's not by a certain manufacturer. It's this sort of campaigning, adventuring game that allows you to. Nobody was kind of doing that with any new games at the time when it came out, and it took on really well. Like, it was really popular. It had expansions. It seemed like people were seemed to be playing it everywhere. Like, if you're on the like YouTube and other places, you could see people playing it all over the world. Like I could see people playing it locally. And so given that it was like a pure rule set that you didn't have to buy miniatures from them. Now I think in all fairness, you don't have to buy miniatures, but I do believe the company does sell miniatures.
Yes.
And so it's not, that you could certainly buy miniatures. They were going to make money off of them, but at the same time, you didn't have to. Like you could still use whatever you wanted, is what I understood.
You went strong-armed into it.
Yeah, exactly. And so from that perspective, you weren't going to get shunned. It was part of it that you could just pick up stuff. It was part of the nature of it that you could pick up stuff and just use that stuff. So to me, that was a really great thing. And if somebody was looking for that kind of game today, it's unlikely I would tell somebody to go hunt and look for an out-of-print book of Morinheim. As much as like I would want to play it, and I have it, and that's probably what I would go to first for sure. It's not what I would tell somebody else probably. If they were asking for my opinion for them,
unless you're trying to get somebody to come into playing games with you. You want to get them to play stuff that is readily available that they can order or just pick off the store shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility is a big thing.
Involved.
Definitely. Like it's like I know we keep talking about BattleTech, but
hoorah!
That's one of the things for it. That's one of the things that's really shifted for the likes of BattleTechs and other war games is it's all well and good telling somebody about a war game and introducing them to it. But if they can't buy the miniatures and they can't buy the rule set, what's the point? It's like you're dangling something in front of them that they can't obtain easily.
Yeah.
So I could see the merit in the likes of Frostgrave.
Yeah, basically
something that's easily accessible.
It's unattainium. It's out there, but you have to rely on someone willing to give it up so you can get it to use it.
Yeah. And it really, depending on the way you did your list, like I realized we didn't really set strict rules, but if you did it as my favorite games, then it's different totally than what you're recommending for other people sometimes. Yeah. And so, yeah. So how about you, Dwayne? What's your number one? Since you've already said Warhammer Fantasy, I just would have thought that there is no number one now.
Oh, there is, yeah. How little you know, Palmer. How little you know. It has to be. It's a board game. I'm ashamed to say, but I've had nothing but great memories, great experiences. Anytime I've introduced somebody to it, they've loved it. People, like my brother, who's not really into wargaming and such or fantasy, I've gotten him playing. I've gotten my 6-year-old nephew playing, and he's enjoyed it. It has to be the one and only Hero Quest. Absolute best. Absolute best. It's brilliant. There's been
so you have the original.
I have the original.
Yeah.
But I've also I've asked a friend to order one from the Kickstarter. So it's becoming available again. Okay. Yeah. So it's not too bad. But Hero Quest, man, it's a brilliant game. It's a good dungeon delver. It's amusing to watch the younglings be greedy little dwarfs and stab everyone in the back and try and run away with all the gold. You know what I mean? It's good. It's a good system. It's a good game. It's a great setting, and it's a great way to introduce people to fantasy and gaming in general. Its counterpart in the sci-fi department for me is Space Hulk. So those two, they're good games in my eyes to get people playing who aren't really into it. And even if you are into fantasy and wargaming, it's an enjoyable experience.
No, I would say it's almost like playing Munchkin.
No, I detest Munchkin. I'm sorry. You can't put Hero Quest and Munchkin in the same ballpark. You just can't. I'm offended now, Rusty. I thought we were friends.
The glove has been thrown down. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
I'm no longer amused. Go away.
Rusty's like, I'm just kidding.
No, it's cool. Look, I'm blaming it on polishing the end of this bottle off. That's what I'm blaming it on, all right?
I've never played Hero Quest. I heard great things about it. I've heard great things about it. I've never actually played the game, and so it's one of those games that you hear everybody talk about. Like, unless you played it, you just hear everybody talk about it. And wargaming, it definitely has a huge following, like going back. And I wasn't sure. It's interesting how you brought up a lot of old games, Dwayne, tonight. I actually thought maybe you were going to say something like Zombicide when you said board game, because that actually is a lot of fun too. Like I've had so much fun with Zombicide with my family. Like, and it's it's not a dungeon. Massive Darkness is a little more probably trying to achieve what HeroQuest does, like as far as like the dungeon crawl, where Massive like Zombicide's like pure survival. But those games are fun too. Like absolutely, those are awesome.
Zombicide's a solid game as well. Yeah, it's a really good one too. Like, it's the same sort of element where it's the players are fighting against the environment, but they can also sort of turn on each other if they want to. You know what I mean? It's that like I could see how it's sort of in the same ballpark. I get what you're saying, Bob.
Someone I used to have the HeroQuest game. But during the flood of 2003, it's no more, sadly. But
I can hear some more trumpets playing.
It's like I got some of the plastic miniatures that came in it. It's like I have them someplace. They're in a bag someplace. But other than that, everything else that was in that box got thrown out in the garbage because they got soaked in sewer.
This is why metal miniatures are so good.
Yeah, them and plastic floats, but
yeah. Away.
Yeah. I live on a hill and I got flooded out, so that was the fun thing.
That's impressive.
Yeah. No, it was a backed up sewer. Came up into the basement and flooded the basement.
Oh my gosh.
So that was fun.
Even if you dried it out, you wouldn't really want to touch it again at that stage.
No, it's like going out the door. That's what happened to my 5th edition and 6th edition Warhammer box sets. They were gone, sadly.
Dodo. Now, my original box set got chucked out. I remember when I was younger, so I managed to cobble together my current board game set that I crack out every now and then out of 2 incomplete sets. I've sort of merged them into one. So I have a few little extras of some of the monsters and some cards, but of a full set again. But definitely, if you get the chance, Palmer, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you would.
I hear it's kind of pricey, that Kickstarter.
You can sit around with all your friends and drink beer and get stupid and have fun.
Yeah, you can sort of approach it more seriously as well. It's like it's
very similar to playing Munchkin.
How could you? Slighted twice in the one night. How could you?
Do they have Munchkin HeroQuest?
Give it time.
Oh, they got so many different versions of Munchkin nowadays. Yeah. It's crazy.
I like HeroQuest in that it's a good dungeon delver, but there's a narrative storyline, so you have like each individual mission, but it's sort of like introduces you to like campaign play. So it's like you start off and you have your trials, and there's different missions as you're going, or quests, should I say. But there's this storyline going on behind it. It's like you fought this orc warlord, but he managed to escape, and then you know what I mean. It's very very sort of basic, but it's good for what it is. Like obviously for the likes of us, we're used to being into it, but you still get something out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it's like when they came out with Silver Tower. When Silver Tower came out, I was like expecting, it's like, this is going to be like HeroQuest. I'm like, this is what I'm expecting it to be. And it's like, no. That was sadly lacking. But
I picked up War of the Ring, the board game.
Gary.
And it's like it's like on the whole Middle Earth map, and basically you're like either the good side or the evil side, and you're either the party trying to get and to destroy the ring, or you're Sauron trying to destroy the party. And it actually Ian Diomede, he got me into it because he was talking about it, and I was looking at, and it's one of those things where I'm definitely planning on I just see Gary join. That's who you were referring to when you said Gary. Hey, Gary. And so Ian actually got me into that, and it looks like an amazing game. I've watched reviews on it, but it looks like fairly intensive. Like if you're into Lord of the Rings, which I am, like you truly are fighting like an epic battle scale on this board game. Like literally you have like provinces or something like in Middle Earth that you never even really normally deal with, like if you're just casually watching the movie, but you're trying to defend these things. Like, and one of the reviews for it on YouTube, these guys were like, they review all board games, and they're like, one of the good things about this game is that you truly feel like you're fighting like the War of the Ring, like when you're done, but when you're done, like one of the bad things about it is like you really feel like you're fighting the War of the Ring, like truly, like you get so into it that you start thinking about it after the game, of everything that happened. And so I am looking forward to trying that at one point. I don't know if either of you guys have played it.
Which one?
I've seen video reviews of it. I think I've actually watched the guys that you're talking about, and they go into like the post-traumatic stress of playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seemed to me like kind of maybe like the Lord of the Rings version of maybe Avalon Hill's Axis and Allies board games. It's sort of that level of depth to them, and there's a lot going on. It's it seems like something I'd be interested. Like if a friend was like, "Hey, do you want to spend a day playing this game?" I'm a sucker for that type of thing. Axis and Allies or Twilight Imperium. Or,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I like those board games that could take a whole day. I'm a sucker for them, so I could see myself playing it.
Absolutely.
Like
yeah.
Twilight Imperium's right there. That's a long playing game right there.
But it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
In the once every 5 years you get to play it,
Yeah.
So
it's like we had every once in a while we have a board game night at our local game shop, and every once in a while I would join it, and they post up, "Hey, we're gonna be playing Twilight Imperium at this day." It's like, I'm gonna go over and just play it for the sake of playing it. It's like I never win, but it's like it gives you an opportunity to sit down and actually play the game. It takes forever today. It's like playing. You ever play Risk? And everybody's sitting there. Yeah, my daughter was saying, "Who wants to play Risk?" And everybody look at her.
I managed to persuade my siblings. They have nostalgia for Risk now. So my brother and my sister will play Risk with me willingly, of their own will, their own free will, because they enjoyed it. That's what I mean. That's what I used to.
That's a great one too. That's a good one.
Wrangle them into.
So I don't think we heard, unless you slipped it in and we just quickly passed on from it. I don't think you said your number one yet, Rusty.
No, I have not.
Yeah, so like we're waiting for your the grand finale of your number one fantasy game.
If he says Munchkin, I swear to God.
No, it's not Munchkin. It's I was going to say Dungeons and Dragons, but no. It is War Machine Hordes.
Oh,
it's like it's another skirmish system that you can. I love the previous edition. The newest edition is like not so much, but the previous edition was really good. I got really good at. Let's say I heard a dinging sound, but
it ain't me.
Not me. I don't think.
Okay, it's coming through my computer like ding, 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 ding. What the heck is that?
Time's up.
Shut down.
We're getting ready to freeze.
No, it's one of those games where you can sit down, design. You have your warlock or your warcaster, basically, that's in charge of your force that's controlling everything, and you got to protect them in all possible ways. And you got your little. If you're playing War Machine, you got your jacks running out there in front of you, and you got your foot troops going around chopping things up, and you're just chucking out some spells and stuff to keep yourself alive or keep your troops alive, and you're hacking them up and they're hacking you up, and more times than not you figure out the kill shot that wins you the game because you're trying to kill the other guy's warcaster or warlock, and it's like you get your big jack going in there and go stick and then rip them apart and shit. Yeah, I won, type thing. But
you do look like you like it.
Oh, I do. It's a fun game.
I've heard really good things.
It's like they had the great miniatures, nice little armies. I played Crix, which was an undead army. There's a theme here. I like my undead armies for some reason. I don't know why. But,
like to keep one foot in the grave.
Maybe. I've died a few times, so maybe that's it. I know it's on the
Nearly died from that terrible pun, my God. I've never played War Machine or Hordes. I did buy one of the War Machine rule sets and intend to play, but I never got around to it. But the aspect of it I always kind of liked, and when I inquired about it, was that you could play War Machine against Hordes.
Yes.
You could fight them against each other, even though they were separate sort of games, and the mechanics sort of switched. So it was like the Warcaster generated the power in War Machine, but the beasts generated the power in Hordes, or whatever the abilities were. So it sort of flipped a bit. But I thought that was interesting that both gaming systems could play against each other. I always found that aspect of it interesting.
And it was still balanced, like fairly balanced.
Wow. Yeah, they because energy is energy. Mm-hmm. You rile up your beast for Hordes. They would have they'd send their energy off, and then the warlock would suck it off, and he would be able to use it for casting protection and cast his spells and stuff. And then in War Machine, the caster himself, he's one that generates the energy, and he would cast it out, put stuff on spells on his own dudes and stuff like that. So it was like one siphoning, the other one's pushing out. So
yeah,
but they balanced out with each other quite well. So you could I had a Legion and Scorn army for my Hordes, and I had Crix and Legion of Cyrus was the other one. My two forces. I do have my son played Signar. So between that, I had 5. We have 5 armies. I started building another army, but of Cador.
Brad says he used to play Scorn and Cador, or Cador. War Machine Hordes.
They both, Scorn and Cador, played very similar to each other. The Scorn was the war beast, big giant honking, slow, methodical type beast. Cador was the same way, big giant, slow honking jacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get really in depth into it, just trying to figure out how every army would work and combos. That was the thing, is like trying to figure out combos with your troops. And it's a skirmish system. And when I used to play Magic, that was another thing. You're trying to figure out combos, and it just fed right into it also. And that whole thing of trying to figure out combos and building an army kind of went out the door with the newest edition that came out, and just like everybody just like, yeah.
I was about to ask what happened. It seemed that like it was very popular, and then it dropped off very quickly. So was it a newer edition that came out and sort of
the previous edition, we would have 40 to 60 people a night playing games. You'd go and you're just like, oh, there's no tables open. And you're just standing around with your little army waiting to have a spot to open up. And somebody would finish the game. And they go, oh, anybody want to play me? Or, okay, we'll clean the table off so someone else can play. So you always had somebody, you could play 1-2 games in a night if you wanted to. And then the new edition came out, and it's just like, gone. It was hardly anybody.
Yeah. Brad says he has a small Troll Bloods and Circle of Orboros.
Yeah. I do have some Troll Bloods, but they're part of my Crix army. So.
Cool. Well, that was an interesting one. I didn't quite expect that, but you have mentioned that you played War Machine Hordes in the past. So that was interesting. It's unfortunate Todd wasn't on tonight because that was his request, but he can watch it on later when it comes on streams. No, but we were thinking also of doing another movie one in the future, and because we were even deciding, like, were we talking about games tonight or like our 5 favorite fantasy movies? Because like we had a lot of fun with the last episode when we talked about the 5 favorite horror movies. That was actually a lot of fun because, well, like a lot of people are into movies, but Rusty and I are always talking about film and movies, and so it was kind of neat to go through our top 5 picks, and really everybody in the audience was throwing out stuff that they liked too, so it was a lot of fun.
We have a tendency to send back to each other. It's like, I'm watching this tonight. I just watched the Dracula series that's on Netflix. It's a 3-episode series. Very strange, but lots of flavor if you ever seen it.
I think the last thing I watched was the last of The Expanse on Amazon Prime. I was originally watching it on Netflix, and then I went on my way to get Amazon Prime just to watch The Expanse, because I'd only watched. I think there's only like the first 2 or 3 seasons of The Expanse on Netflix. I think
4 and 5 were Amazon only, and you can still watch it on the Sci-Fi Channel, or I guess it was on Netflix also. But for the other 3 seasons, I'm a big fan. I read the books and I love the series too.
Yeah, I'm just fantasy and sci-fi. It's like I'm there. If there's a sci-fi film out, I'll go out my way to watch it. Like that's what I'm into. As you can tell from the Wargames.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot. I know that you're primarily into the game that will not be mentioned and Warhammer 40K. And so I was surprised as to how much you said tonight, Dwayne, and not only on the stuff that you like, but stuff that you want to play and stuff. Like you had a lot of fantasy like, because I wondered, you said you'd be up for coming on a show, and I was like, well, why don't you come on tonight? But I was thinking, with the top 5 fantasy games, I'm not sure if that's going to be up Dwayne's alley. But then I was like, we'll see what he says. But you actually, you had a lot of games you played, and
I started off in fantasy. That's like I played fantasy before I played 40K. Like I started off in fantasy, and what got me into 40K is grandparents on one side of the family. I think it was a Christmas or a birthday, bought me a Space Wolves 3rd edition Codex and a box set of Blood Claws. That's what started me off in 40K. And before that, it was all like Britannian Knights of the Realm and Saurus Warriors. So I'm interested in trying other things.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I don't just stick to one thing. I'm sort of like, if something piques my interest, I'll try it. I like trying new things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've covered things pretty well tonight then. Thank you for everybody joining the show. We've had some nice feedback tonight, as usual.
Hopefully I won't have these technical difficulties again.
It wasn't too bad. It was only one time. It wasn't like it didn't happen like throughout the whole.
It's grand. You had me to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah,
you were sorted, like, you know what I mean?
We added a third 3D printing topic for a little while.
You managed to sneak that one in there while you were gone,
Yep.
Well, the interesting thing is that earlier today, my computer, it's like, do you wish? It's like you click on it and go, oh, it's got an update. So I updated my computer this morning, and then it just must have had a technical difficulty come up, and they sent out another update or something, and that was automatic. I'm like, I had no control over that one.
He thinks he's in the clear. We've got him now, lads.
He's doing a show. Give him an update. No.
All right. Well, good to see everybody again. And
all right, we'll be back on March 32nd for our next show.
32nd.
Oh yeah,
impressive.
That's April 1st, April Fool's.
Yeah. There you go. Over at Helcorex.
They'll be over
26.
I think we already have one topic, I think we're going to do, aren't we?
You're probably right. I'll take your word for it. I know we were talking about it. So
we'll discuss it next weekend when we try to figure it out.
Exactly.
All right.
Good
night, everybody.
See you.
Thanks for having me on again. Cheers.
All right. Been fun.